Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for October 16th. My name is Hazel Braithwaite, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. First, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Algonquin-speaking people known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. So we have a pretty full agenda tonight, and as you can see, a full house, so we're going to get started right away. And first on the agenda is Parks, Recreation and Culture, and we have Mr. Herman, Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture, and Mr. Holding, who is the Commission Chair in attendance. So I'll let you get settled, and is there anything that you would like to start off with, Mr. Herman, or just take questions right away?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the agenda was fairly straightforward. Wasn't particularly thick, but two things I'd point out. One is in the program report, if you haven't already noted, we were lucky enough to have the Rotary Club of Oak Bay donate what's called an easy ladder for the pool. It's some stairs that allow people with mobility issues to get in and out of the pool much more easily, and we were very thankful for that donation. And then for anybody who wants to start their Christmas shopping, the 40th annual Monterey Bazaar is happening on October 21st. So I thought I'd point that out as well.
Thanks. That's where I get all my books for the whole year, so perfect. Any questions from any committee members? Councillor Kirby.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder about the bazaar. That's where I got my last telephone, which for emergency purposes, the old school one. The one thing I noticed was that in the park section of the program reports, the marine kiosk is now completed at Cattle Point, and I've seen it there. And I was just waiting to hear if there's going to be some unveiling or reveal of the kiosk. Celebration of the completion.
Through the chair, I've not heard of any plans, but I will talk to the manager of Park Services tomorrow to check on that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for your excellent and thorough report. I'm having to search to find questions to ask, but I have to ask. In the park section, everyone seems to be so concerned about trees these days. Page 4. You point out how many Gary oaks were taken out, cut down on private property, but unfortunately of the 10 boulevard trees that were removed, it doesn't say how many of those were Gary oaks, please. That would be the first question.
Through the chair again, I would have to check with the manager of Park Services. I can ask that question and get back to members of council.
Much appreciated. A follow-up question related to that, if I may, has to do with, in particular for the public trees, maybe you could also follow up, assuming some of them were Gary oaks, are there any plans to replace them, and those sorts of general questions with respect to those trees. And I was asked to ask this question by someone who couldn't be here today. Were any of the trees taken down eagle trees? Or did the city take into account any potential issues regarding nesting or migratory birds, et cetera, et cetera? Possibly a rhetorical question, but I thought I would just ask.
Through the chair, I couldn't speak to that specifically, but that's standard protocol that we would ensure that those trees were not disturbed until it was appropriate to do so.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just a quick question on there's some discussion there obviously at the meeting around playgrounds and the possibility of having a master plan or some other sort of mechanism by which if there's opportunities to build. To my mind, there certainly are opportunities for people to donate and so forth, and there tend to be popular things at various times as they pop up, and having a plan in place to do that would make sense to me. Is that something that's sort of in the general time frame to kind of sort of do something like that, so that if there's money available that we can get matching grants and build if they're available? Or is that sort of not, it was hard to tell from the minutes whether or not that was sort of moving forward to have something a bit more tangible.
Through the chair, I think while there was discussion around private donations, there was no direction, and I don't think staff are working currently on solicitation of private donations. What we have been working on, there's as part of the Capital Works Reserve, I believe, there's a bit of money set aside, and we're trying to augment that through the operating budget contributions to build that fund up in case there are opportunities for grant funding. So we do have some seed money available if grants come up, but we're trying to augment that as much as we can. Certainly if a private donation came forward, I think we would deal with that on a time-by-time basis to see what our needs are at that time.
Okay, so through you, Chair, the question is really more around obviously it'd be nice if those things do arise, and I appreciate you're not soliciting that, but if there's sort of a plan where we know what we want in each of the different playgrounds and so forth. So if someone says, I'd like my neighborhood, I'd like to donate some money for that we would have sort of some understanding of what's short, what's good, what we might consider. So that sort of plan was what I was more referring to than anything sort of monetary.
And through the chair, certainly we're aware, and again, I guess that would be park by park or playground by playground specific. We're certainly aware of those playgrounds that will need attention in the next 2 to 5 years in terms of replacement or what have you. In terms of enhancement, those are some of the discussions that the Commission's having right now in terms of what they would like to see, generally speaking, in some of those locations. There is no, I wouldn't say there's a plan in place now. Right now, it's kind of the information gathering stage.
Thank you.
I think if I can add to that, I think that also we have the capacity to take donations through the public for art within our community, and I think that we could in the future, if we deem it necessary or we want to do that, we can take donations and issue tax receipts for donations that come to us for parks as well. So any further questions? If not, thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Any further questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Number 2 on our agenda is the quarterly financial report. We do have Ms. Carter here to answer any questions, if the committee has any questions at all for Ms. Carter. Councillor Murdoch.
Just a quick question through you to Ms. Carter. On item number 7, under investments, I noticed that we have, a fair bit of, we don't have much money coming in when we're paying out money, and then it starts flowing in again once we get our taxes paid. And I know there's been some new funds available through MFA, Municipal Finance Authority. Have we been in contact with them and are looking at some of those sort of high interest short-term savings accounts?
Through the chair, yes, we have been in contact with MFA, and there is one new investment opportunity for short-term funds that came up approximately 2 weeks ago. There's another one coming up in approximately 6 weeks, and we do currently invest with MFA in a number of different types of investments. So we have some of the more liquid investments, the money market fund, we also have the bond fund and the intermediate fund. And it isn't recommended that we pull money from our current investments because it is a diversified portfolio. However, we could, if we so choose in the future, diversify a little bit further by investing in some of these opportunities. So I do have a meeting scheduled with MFA to review that.
Thank you. And any for Councillor Ney.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Ms. Carter. The item number 13 came to my attention around the Carnarvon Park Master Plan. And I'm just wondering, it looks like a good chunk has been spent, but certainly not anywhere near all of it. And I'm just wondering if you could update us about where those monies, what they've been spent on and where we are on that timeline. Thank you.
Through the chair, I don't have the specifics of the GL detail with me, but I know that it is in progress, and I could certainly provide that information.
Thank you. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. A question primarily for Director of Financial Services regarding item number 5 and the additional monies relating to building permits, 133% above budgeted. I was wondering if you could comment, is this reflecting the additional fees that we instituted in the last year, or is this additional activity, or is it a combination of both?
Through the chair, it would be a combination of both. The number of building permits that have been issued this year has increased substantially. 2016 saw an increase, and 2017 has also seen a significant increase.
And if I may,
Certainly.
I also want to ask about item number 11, Building Department bylaw enforcement. Could you break that number down a little bit? I know Heritage Conservation Area is in there. What else is involved in that year-to-date $600,000, please?
Through the chair, those, that would include items such as the protective inspections, administration budget with salaries, et cetera, and also animal and pest control.
Final follow-up is any, with respect to the secondary suites work that's, I think, was started and then maybe stopped, is that also part of this amount, please?
Through the chair, yes, it would be.
Councillor Ney? Oh, no. I just have, does anybody else have any other questions? I just have one comment, actually, and that would be, again, to reiterate the disappointment of the money that came in for University of Victoria. I think it's sad that we only get $50,000 and they've reduced it by $5,000 for this year. And I think, again, we have to perhaps write a letter to the powers that be, and I think the mayor wants to make a comment on that.
Yes, that's something that that I have been working on with our Chief Administrative Officer, that we're going to set up a meeting with the university, and then we'll follow that up with a meeting with the Minister of Advanced Education, and at some point reach out to other municipalities who are feeling the same kind of reduction of grants. And it is important to remember that we do not tax provincial properties, and so they're given out essentially as almost like a charitable donation to us, whereas we're providing services to them by way of fire, police, and many other of the planning services. So federal government does something very different. They do it on an assessed value basis when they give out their grants. And which would mean, and I think I mentioned this before, that a community that has a Navy in it would get 12 million. We have a university and we get 50,000. So there is a significant disparity between how grants in lieu are calculated between federal government and provincial government, and it's clearly inequitable. And we will continue to advance our cause and the cause of other communities who find themselves in a similar position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, I'd entertain a
receipt.
motion. Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the Cadboro Bay Bike Lanes, Foul Bay Road to Bowker Avenue, and we did have an amended agenda item come up on this, and Mr. Haran is going to have a presentation, I believe. Following Mr. Haran's presentation, I'd entertain questions of staff only, not comments, I think, first off, from the committee, and then we'll move on to the public. So, Mr. Haran, Director of Engineering Services.
Good evening. So, of course, I've brought Mr. Richard Ding with me as well, our transportation and specialist or design engineer, to help answer questions and go through the presentation. So this project, and especially the report and all the materials that go with it, can be fairly complex. There's a lot there, a lot to absorb and a lot to examine and understand to come to a night like tonight. So what we've done is just sat down to take a few minutes to walk everyone through the key issues and help enable the discussion. There are a couple of background documents that really guide where this project, how it's got started, and where we've ended up for tonight. The first one is the Capital Regional District's Pedestrian and Cycling Master Plan, which was published in 2011. Oak Bay staff participated in the development of that plan, as well as some Oak Bay residents as part of the community input to that to the plan. In short, the plan encourages development of walkway and bikeway networks, encouraging networks that allow for all users. And there's a whole bunch there, and we'll talk a little bit more about the details of the PCMP because it comes up again a couple of times. Oak Bay's community plan has some key language in there about encouraging a vision of varied multimodal transportation networks, provide infrastructure to encourage more active modes of transport, provide more and safer commuter and recreational cycle options, and apply design standards that address all ages and all access and all modes and mobilities. So as I mentioned, I come back to the pedestrian and cycling master plan, and that master plan identifies Cadboro Bay Road and speaks to it specifically as making a recommendation that it be designated a primary intercommunity street, as well as recommending that Oak Bay modify it to become a separated on-street bike facility. Council's strategic priorities also identify bike lanes specifically from Cadboro Bay, along Cadboro Bay Road from Foul Bay Avenue to Bowker, and this is, I bring it up now to say, to talk about the priority, but also to say it specifies the scope for what we looked at for this particular project. We've completed an options analysis phase. This is what we're calling the feasibility studies and the development of options for consideration by committee of the whole tonight. The goal from the outset was to try to develop all ages, all access bike lanes to meet the council intent. The primary document that captures the feasibility study is Opus's analysis, the report that's at attachment 1. Unfortunately, the lane width in Cadboro Bay Road at that area does not accommodate the full potential solutions for all ages, all access. So what we've done is provide two options that are still considered good options and feasible options, and we'll talk about those in a second. So this drawing that we've produced, you won't be able to see everything on the drawing, but what it comes from is the pedestrian and cycling master plan's design guidelines. And what you're seeing is the design guidelines for an arterial road with curb and gutter, which is what Cadboro Bay Road is in that zone. Across the top, you'll see the rainbow strip of colors. In the far left, you see class 3. In the middle, where it's yellow, you see class 2. And then on the right, where it's green and blue, is class 1. And that's how how the different types of bike lane designs are classified. And the pedestrian cycle master plan gives the guidance of what we're seeking for as a class 1 cycle facility. So the two options that we're presenting tonight fall in the class 1. Essentially what we have is option 2, which is a buffered bicycle lane, and option 1, which is a combination of a buffered bicycle lane and a cycle track with protected with parking. The two options are very, very similar, and I'll go through a couple of slides to highlight some of the key differences between the two options. So this will be difficult to see from your chairs, but hopefully just as I describe it and having looked at the drawings, it'll be clearer. What we're looking at is two versions of the same design of Cadboro Bay Road. The top drawing is option 1, the bottom drawing is option 2, showing the area just in front of Oak Bay High School. And this is the first area going from west to east where there's an actual difference between, real difference between the two drawings, between the two designs. At the top, you'll be able to see the beginning of parking protected lanes, and in the bottom you see the buffered lanes. The next slide just shows a little bit further to the east. Again, top left is option 1, bottom right is option 2. So again, top left you see a couple of red arrows pointing to some areas where there are bike lanes protected by parking spots, and in the bottom right you see where the differences are. There's just a buffered bike lane in that area. We initiated a public feedback period a month ago, September 18th. We did that by sending letters to the residents along Cadboro Bay Road, as well as the business owners. The Oak Bay News published an article, and it was social media picked up the story as well to pass the information around. We received approximately 60 pieces of correspondence from business owners, organizations, and residents. This is a summary of, this is my summary of the feedback, although every piece of correspondence has been included as an attachment. In general, there's broad support for the bicycle lanes. There's a lot of desire to see all ages, all access lanes. There is some desire to see the lanes extended farther north beyond Bowker Avenue, and as I mentioned earlier, there's a limit to the scope of this particular project. There are some concerns raised about impact to traffic on smaller streets in the vicinity, and not necessarily due to the bike lanes themselves, but residents raising concerns about traffic in that area being busier and the arterials being slower than they used to be, so traffic heading down different directions to try to get around it. So those concerns were raised. And finally, we had a little bit of feedback this time related to residents and businesses and parking along the corridor, but our historical understanding is that there is some concern about parking and the loss that this project will result in terms of on-street parking. So, excuse me one second. The key decision-making factors, the things differentiating option 1 and option 2, design intent in terms of what kind of a cycle facility it is, they're very similar. They're both class 1. The costs for the two project options are comparable. There's quite a lot of variation between a selected option. So if you pick option 1, there's some variation about what you can implement in there, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. Two components to the cost are the lane paint and markings themselves, so the bike lanes themselves, which our current estimates are between $94,000 and $110,000. With associated to this is as well, in addition, is Cadboro Bay Road surface rehabilitation, which is estimated at $520,000. Finally, the loss of the on-street parking, again, very similar. Option 1, there will be a loss of 31 spots, and option 2, it will be 29. This particular slide I brought up to talk a little bit about how things can vary between the different designs. What this is we call it green conflict zone treatment, and that's not really a technical term. It's just one of those things what you read and a lot of people just understand what we're talking about. And you can see in the drawing, this is closer to Foul Bay Road, and you've seen it in other municipalities, and here as well at Lansdowne and Foul Bay. We put the green paint down to signal to drivers that there's a potential conflict between the drivers and the bike lanes themselves. So this treatment is called MMA. It's methyl methacrylate paint. I just wanted to say that out loud in public. The key point I wanted to just mention there is this is quite costly, this MMA treatment, and that this is part of the big reason why there's some variation within the options, how much of the green treatment is used. And the two drawings that are presented as option 1, option 2, they show different amounts of the green treatment just to illustrate that there's some variation between the selected design. The other issue I need to mention is that this MMA treatment has about a 10-year life cycle. In other words, you put it down and it will last 10 years and needs to be redone. The assumption there, though, is that it's done on new pavement. So our recommendation would be, and this is where a good chunk of the discussions about the road resurfacing comes into play when we talk about costs for this project and the scope. The project steps, we've just essentially completed the options analysis and feasibility study. We're currently doing, at this moment, the design intent decision, or at least the discussion around the design intent. The next steps would be scope definition. In other words, within a selected option, the various potential choices that could be done and the budget allocation that goes with it. After that stage would be tender package preparation and a construction phase. And that is the end of my prepared statement, ready for questions.
Perfect. Thank you so very much, Mr. Horan. So we'll entertain questions, not comments at this time, but questions from the committee, please. Councillor Kirby.
Thank you. I must say I'm very excited about this being on the agenda. It's wonderful. Thank you for all the work you've done. The one issue I have between the two options provided is that, and I don't know if I'm just missing something on the drawings, because when you get, even if you scroll in and get close, you can't see, or I haven't been able to tell if there are actual buffers or barriers provided, like way up here. I think this is where we're at in the middle, in the buffered lane, and using the parking as a protection to the cyclists. But the where that isn't available, where there is no parking, where there is no cars to protect the cyclist, is there going to be posts or planters or a curb or anything like that? Or is that part of the scope of reassessing whether or not we resurface the road?
So through the chair, in terms of the design, I brought the design guidelines from the PCMP back up because I was meant to talk about it when I had it up on the slide, but I passed over it. One thing that you can't see very well is at the very bottom of all the drawings of the cars and the roads, there's the lines that plop down, and what those show is the recommended minimum widths of those sections. So the bike lane minimum width for the buffered bike lane is 1.8 meters, and then that white cross-hatched painted buffer is meant to be 0.5 meters. So in our both of the options that are available, we're within 10 centimeters of that minimum guideline. So in both, so you have on the areas where there's parking protected bike lane, you'll have a parked car, you'll have a buffered zone so that the door can open, and then the bike lane. For the one where there is no parking protected, we have the minimums of a bike lane of 1.7 to 1.8 meters and 0.5 meter buffer between the traffic and the bike lanes themselves.
So just to follow up then, so there's not enough room to have an actual barrier when it's only half a meter buffer?
Sorry. The buffer, we are talking about two types. One is the physical buffer, like say a barrier, which you can see the highest level. And then the second level would be a pavement marking buffer zone. What we are using now is pavement marking. We are not using the physical barrier. There may be room for the physical barrier, but we are not. It's not in the design.
Okay. Is there a reason we didn't try for that or include it? Because it wasn't recommended, or?
First, the cost is different. Also, the barrier depends on the speed. Sometimes it's safety concerns. And also, we have a limited space. The parking car, if we put physical barrier, when the car open and close, it's a potential hazard for the drivers, for the passengers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Horan? Councillor Murdoch.
I always got the most. I like letting other people go first. So, yeah, I have a few. Just a couple quick. The PCMP study reference, just so I'm clear, that was done as in general terms, correct? Like it didn't go around and measure the roads and so forth. It was just a high-level guidance.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. The other piece on the design, there's a long strip of green. Normally I see those associated with crossings, but all the way from Fowl Bay Road right to the front of the school is all one long green strip. Is that the intent to mark it all that way, or just the portion? Because on the north side, they're not marked that way. They're marked only in the crossing areas, it looks like.
Through the chair, I think when you look at the design drawings that are provided, when it comes to the green treatment and how much there is, that's part of the area where there's some variation where we could look at it, because that will have an impact on cost. The key decision that we're seeking is around the general concept of, do we go as far as parking protected bike lanes in option one, or do we want to focus on having bike lanes that look the same throughout the whole way, which is the option two buffered.
Okay, thank you. And I agree. I think that's probably the place we have to get to. I just There's a couple of questions I had. One, way back before the school was being built, there was some discussion about the possibility, recognizing the narrowness of this street and the difficulty putting bike lanes in, of actually negotiating with the school district to perhaps give a permanent right-of-way essentially on that strip of grass in front of the school, so we could actually use some of that space for transportation purposes and allow us a bit more buffer space on the road. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if that's happened or not, but it may be now that we have a plan in place and a thing to go forward with, it might be worth having that conversation. I'm just curious if you know the status of that conversation.
Through the chair, that looking at potential rights of way with the school district was not explored as part of this particular project. Our experience with similar issues related to bus shelters and so on, it's been a challenge to do that. But we haven't done it for this particular project.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I just recognizing that the major benefit of these bike lanes really in this area of town is the two schools. It's going to be the elementary school and the high school. It would make a certain amount of sense if they can to help out. Then I guess the second question big question I have here is on the diagram itself, and it's a little hard to tell because the current school isn't on that diagram, but just some general concerns more around the flow of traffic and safety of the interactions there. So I guess I'm always aware of the fact that when there's cars trying to turn, especially on a thoroughfare road, there's always a sort of weird pressure of cars coming up behind and trying to get through and managing the traffic flowing on the right with the bikes and the pedestrians. And I'm just wondering about the wisdom of having a left turn lane at Florence and a right turn lane, but both lanes going through, and then immediately afterwards turning into a merging lane. And that merging lane, as far as I can tell, is going to be right in front of the entrance to the parking lot / drop-off area. So it's going to be the highest sort of area for traffic, both pedestrian, bike, and cars. And in a merging zone where you have, by letting that right lane go through, you can have some cars shoulder checking to merge. At the same time, you have other cars possibly slamming on their brakes to avoid turning into pedestrians and bikes on the right. So I'm just wondering if there's been any thought there about perhaps managing that traffic flow a little bit better so there's a bit more clear delineation, like just a right turn lane at B Street, which is probably the busiest intersection we have there with people going to the rec center and the housing, and then more of a thoroughfare going through.
Through the chair, I think when it comes down to any design of what bike lanes like this would look like, or any design, there's a lot of trade-offs and decisions that need to be made. So I think that what we could do at this stage is take those questions away and have another look at the assumptions, and a second thought. So, like, does that make sense from a design perspective, and see what decisions were made or why specifically those were done. But I think we come back to that's a question we can take away, but it still allows us to allow council to make some their views known on the options that are on the table.
And my second, almost last question here, just in option number 1, we have some of the cars east of Eastdown essentially are parked on the inside of the bike lane. So they're in sort of cutouts essentially in the sidewalk. So the bikes go outside there, then they go inside the cars before Epworth. And I'm always leery of design changes that change sort of halfway through. So people coming out of one road expect one thing, and then people coming out of another road expect something completely different. I think we've all been kind of accustomed to seeing the cars or bikes in a certain place, and I'm just wondering about if you could maybe just comment on the fact that they're going to change sort of one block to the other, and that's the only block essentially where we're sort of changing this one piece.
Through the chair, Mr. Ding and I had a conversation about this morning, just to look again at that section, and there is that the transition is factored in terms of the sight lines and how close the parking is allowed to that intersection to allow both the cars and the bikes to have enough room to see what's happening there to keep it a safe intersection.
Okay, and sort of further to that, as cars come out of those, particularly where they're going inside the parked cars, we all know how we pull out of stop signs on a busy street. We sort of inch our way we stop at the stop line, or mostly stop, and then we sort of inch our way forward onto the road to look. And with this design, it appears that would sort of put your body of your car completely blocking the bike lane. So if they're outside, it seems to me that bicycles would be able to continue to pass like a car would until the traffic is clear, and you wouldn't be blocking it. Is there any concerns in that scenario there with that sort of bike lanes inside the parked cars, we'd run into that situation.
Through the chair, I think we've seen in Oak Bay definitely, and there are places where the car approaches the stop bar, stops, and then is required to inch forward, and that's allowed to do. So there's some areas in this bike lane design where the car would hit the stop bar and turning onto Cadboro Bay Road and would need to inch forward to properly see what was happening. There is some potential that, like places like Pandora, where the drivers will inch forward, assuming they can make it into the road, and then realize, oh no, there's a car coming faster, and they'll have to stop, and they will end up having stopped right in the bike lane. So that is the part of the reason why we have the conflict zone treatment, to try to encourage drivers to be more aware of that potential. But that is definitely a concern, a valid concern that you've raised.
Just second to last one here. Just has been any thought put to what to do with the cars? I mean, any satellite image view of that area is always chock-a-block full of every parking spot full of cars. Is there has been any thought as part of this process to where those cars are expected to go, or what drives that parking right now?
Through the chair, so we've done some studies about parking behavior in the area, but I don't believe that we necessarily have a prediction about where the cars will end up going if the parking spots are not available.
Fair enough. I think, obviously some of the side roads and so forth would probably take some of that load, although they are residential only. I'm sure that won't necessarily stop it. So my last question is, and probably a big one, since there's $500,000 or so in the road retreatment considered as part of this to maximize the length of and lifespan and the quality of the bike lanes, what is the state of our infrastructure underneath those roads, and are we in a position to replace anything that needs to be replaced now before we start digging things up, so we don't have to dig up our shiny new road in a few years' time?
So there's 3 bits of underground infrastructure that we would talk about. That's not really a good technical term. There's storm sewers in that area underground, which are they're not on the 6 monthly or 12 monthly flushing program, meaning they function properly and they're in fairly good condition. We haven't CCTV'd them recently yet, but based on the lack of reports of issues and the no requirement to flush regularly, they're in pretty good shape. We have sanitary sewers in the area which have been camera'd, and though they are in the process of, they're relatively old, they're far enough behind the priority list in terms of high-risk sanitary sewers throughout the district that we have no intention to replace them in the near future. We may line them more soon, but the risk of failure in terms of having to dig up the road is low. And finally, the water mains underground in that area. There's the area closer to Bowker Avenue, just as you turn the corner, there's a water main there that is relatively old, a material that we'd want to replace, but we're still in the middle of assessing. So this would be part of our options and our project development. We could phase that portion when, it's not necessarily urgent to do that water main replacement, but in the next few years we may need to. And we'll factor that in with the different phases of rolling out the bike lanes if it's approved.
Through you, Chair, thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you. Mayor Jensen.
Thank you. I've noticed down on the Pandora biking lanes, just before one gets to Douglas, so it's between Blanchard and Douglas, where there are two large office buildings being built, and they've not put the permanent biking lanes in, but what they're using are 2-foot, kind of looks like plastic stanchions that appear to be somehow attached to the pavement. And they appear to be quite effective in demarcating the traveled road car lanes from the biking lanes. Is that something that you considered or could be considered in either option 1 or option 2, particularly in areas that were drawn to your attention by Councillor Murdoch as being perhaps a little more high conflict areas? Is that something that you looked at or could be looked at?
Through the chair, there are a few areas actually where we have those stanchions that you're speaking of that are already part of the design. I'm not personally familiar of whether it would be effective to use those in other areas to improve safety, but we can definitely look at that as an option.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ney.
Thank you very much for the report and the work that has been done on this. So through you, Chair, the question to staff is, in the report, it speaks about the dependencies on other district projects, right? And obviously the Cadboro Bay Bowker Avenue is one. And it looks like, it sounds to me from what you're speaking to here that there's work underway around that. And I'm just wondering what the work is. Obviously they have to segue these projects, and if you could just update us where that is and if there's any issues, how that's going.
Through the chair, mentioning the project dependencies is really how we come to the table with a broad systems approach, a complete streets approach. We know that it makes a lot of sense when we're talking about a specific project. You know, as Councillor Murdoch mentioned, do we need underground infrastructure, things that we need to do there? So it was really important for us to mention that, you know, the two, they interface each other there, so that we need to factor in what's happening at that intersection. So the update on what's happening there is we have completed a survey of the intersection, which is how we gather the data of what the ground actually looks like, so that we can complete a detailed design, which would allow us to do a cost of what the estimated what it'll cost to do the infrastructure change or the intersection change that we're proposing, the option 2 from the 2009 report. Once that detailed design is completed, I'll be able to bring it forward as part of the budget estimates process as a potential capital project subject to council's approval.
Thank you. And Councillor Zelka.
Thank you so much, Chair. And excellent report. Looks like you've done a lot of work on this. I very much appreciate the level of detail in the drawings. I understand with 31 parking spots being removed from option 1 and 29 being removed from option 2. How many parking spots are left along those corridors? I couldn't quite figure that out. I did my best to try and count the spots that were still there, and I unfortunately got lost. Is there some way you can provide at least an estimate of the parking spots that remain, please?
Through the chair, I was worried that I was going to have to tell you that I'd have to take a minute to take the drawings aside and count them, but thankfully Mr. Ding is ahead of the game. There will be 76 parking spaces remaining for which option? Oh, for both options.
76, excellent. I much appreciate that. I have a similar concern to other voices around the table in terms of what to do with those 31 additional cars that will have to go somewhere else. Having a daughter who attends a music program at Oak Bay High in the evenings, and then of course with the soccer and with all the other events that are happening at our wonderful facilities, and all the other parking lots that are already full with our excellent recreation facilities. It does appear to be, if absent any other action, it does appear that the cars that will be have to move as a result of this thing will generally have to move north, it seems to me, into the Epworth area and streets beyond. I know I've already spoken with some of the neighbors in that area, and they already are noticing that much of their parking at nighttime is in some ways overwhelmed already with folks who are attending events at Oak Bay High. The question that leaves me is that while this is a necessary project, and I think very important for us to do, is this going to probably, with absent a huge change in the patterns of our residents, probably going to involve us having to build a parking garage or some sort of a facility in the future? If you could, or is there, what have other communities done in this area to try and deal with the issues that we're encountering and going to encounter? Please.
Through the chair, I think that the project itself and everything that's happening in that area is a result of a council priority. So I think if it was council's desire to to have a new strategic look at parking in that area, then we could do that if it meant offsetting it with some of the other priorities that are happening underway. I think it's worth noting, though, that the parking along that stretch of road is not particularly associated with any houses. It's municipal parking. It's public parking along the street. So there are costs to all projects and initiatives, and it's I think it's a council decision to which costs need to be paid.
I very much appreciate your comments on that. Thank you so much. I do have one more question, touching on the concept of the systems approach in complete streets. It looks like one of the options has to do with having a cycle lane at the same level as the pedestrian lane. Is this what you're referring to when you say that it's at an at-grade protected? Is that what it means? It's not at the road grade. It's at the grade of the pedestrian. I just want to confirm that.
Through you, Chair, no, when it refers to cycle track at grade, it means the grade of the road and not the sidewalk.
All right, thank you. I've noticed as in some other communities, they would often, I've noticed that Saanich has some interesting solutions to some of these problems where they've actually got the cycle track at a different grade from the road. So we're only dealing with 2 grades here. With respect to the pedestrians and a complete streets approach, will this project involve any additions, adjustments, corrections to ramps, work that would make it more easy for our folks who are walking and in a wheelchair, for example? Please.
Through the chair, I would need to go back and look at the drawings, but as far as I'm aware, the sidewalks in that area have the curb drops that we would require. Other than that, the improvements to the sidewalks themselves is out of scope of this proposed project.
Thank you, Councillor Croft.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd like to follow up on the parking. I understand there's 70-odd sites left, but you're losing 20 or 30 odd. But it doesn't show it on the diagram. It shows that there's 3 spaces here and 2 spaces here and 3 spaces there. I'm wondering if you could tell us where those parking spots are going to be lost in the area a little clearer, because it just doesn't seem to show it on the diagram that we've been provided. And if not, maybe you can get back to us on it.
Through the chair, I think the easiest way for us to do that is if we took the drawings away and we were able to we could highlight the areas, so we could produce an electronic document and send it back out to council.
And I realize these are basically preliminary drawings right now for asking for direction on option 1 or option 2, but I also notice that the bus stops don't show up on here as well, so that's something else that is very important for the school. So I hope that those can be added.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd reiterate that as well. I think that Councillor Murdoch brought up the point that it wasn't actually the current school that was on that map that you have currently, so it doesn't show the in-out circular driveway that is there, and I think that makes a big difference, I think. I do have, I think everybody else is finished with their comments. I do have one question, and that is in regards to the volumes used for the analysis from the report from 2015. And I note that, once again, that those dates in 2015 that were used for the numbers were from July and August. Now, obviously, school is not in July and August, and I understand that you've extrapolated some numbers from other reports, and there's a formula that you can use to kind of say, well, this is probably what it would be. But can you comment on that? Like, how accurate is that really? And I guess my next comment within there would be that I noticed that it really took into account the volumes for Oak Bay High School, but it didn't really take in account the volumes for Willow School. So perhaps you can address that.
Absolutely, Chair. I think, though, as just a question for clarification, perhaps if given the premise of what you're saying about when the data was collected, if you could tell me what your concerns are that we're hoping that maybe aren't addressed in the conclusions that we've, or the options that we provided.
Sure. So why would we not, when we're looking at spending a lot of money like this, because we want to do this right. If we're going to put bike lanes in there, we want to do it correctly, and we want to make sure that they're going to be utilized to the extent that we want them to be utilized. So why would we not do another study during school hours that shows what happens at the peak of 8 to 9 and from 3 to 4?
Chair, do you mean in terms of the cyclist traffic or other vehicle traffic at the intersection of Foul Bay?
I think both to show to help know whether or not you should be reducing lanes or expanding the lanes, or you look confused still.
No, Chair, I'm not confused. As I think through how to best answer the question, and then whether I want to have a quick chat with Mr. Ding here. Just 1 second, please.
So what's the magic word beginning with? Through the chair?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, she is the chair, so you
Okay.
can just address.
Through the chair, okay. So when we did the study, actually, the number is not included the school vehicle and the pedestrian, the cyclist. But we had a traffic study, which was the new Oak Bay High School when it was built. Probably many people remember we asked the Oak Bay High School did a traffic study. In that traffic study, we do have the school month traffic volume and pedestrian cyclist. In this report, we also use these numbers. Also, we use the traffic generate manual and say if it's a school, if it's a shopping center, there's a formula we can calculate how many students, how many people will just cycle, or the volume. We factor in these factors.
Right. So in the report, I see that you estimate that it goes from 11 to 20. So 11 bicycles to 20 bicycles in that peak hour.
That's right.
Okay.
And I think to add, Chair, to what Mr. Ding's, or at least to say it another way, is that perhaps we could have included as an attachment the Oak Bay High School studies, the conclusions that we've come to incorporate everything we know of that area in terms of the traffic flow and the predicted increases and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to open it up to the public. I notice that there's a lot of people in the audience. So I know that a lot of people have sent in letters. So if you are going to speak, if you could just give us a brief highlight of your letter, and then if you want to add any new points, that would be great. We'd be happy to hear them. And if you could hopefully contain your comments to 2 minutes, we'd really appreciate that, and we can have more speakers speak. So I will open it up now to the floor if anybody wishes to come forward. And please state your name and the community that you live in and write it down on the piece of paper. Okay, nobody wants to come forward? Okay, I knew if I said that. Yeah, you can sit there, and then if you just write on the piece of paper that's there, your name and community that you live in, and then you can turn on the mic when you're ready to go.
Good evening. My name is David Lindsay. I live in Oak Bay. I actually live on Florence Street. And I wrote a fairly lengthy response. And I don't want to go through all of that because I think that you've probably all had a chance to take a look at it. I had a number of concerns, highlighting them. One is the accuracy of the traffic going east-west, and also the lack of information regarding traffic coming in from the side streets. I didn't think that what seemed to be highlighted in the report. Living on Florence, I'm a little biased, and I have a concern, regardless whether there's bike lanes or not, on the traffic speed volume coming down Florence Street. But given the bike lane project, there's significant traffic coming down Florence Street southbound. In the period 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, there is somewhere in the order of 80 to 90 vehicles, and the bulk of those are turning right and then will head west. That was not taken into account in the report, in the feasibility study, and will have a significant impact on queuing and loss of service for vehicles along that route. Option 2 calls for the elimination of the one lane in that area of B Street, Florence Street, towards Foul Bay. And I was there this morning, actually, counting vehicles going in that direction and just observing the traffic. And certainly traffic did back up from Foul Bay already into B Street, Florence Street. So eliminating one lane, you'll see a significant change occurring there, and it'll become worse. So so overall, I think that yes, there's not enough traffic data that has been generated and in the evaluation. I did see a large number of pro letters, and I'm for bike lanes, don't get me wrong. I'm a cyclist myself, and I like to feel safe. But also, it's important to keep in mind that there are large volumes of vehicles using that road east and west. And eastwards, this morning, 8 to 9, kids going to school, parents, I suppose, as well, going to wherever. There was 31 bicycles going east and 13 bicycles going west. Comparing the 13 bicycles going west, there was pretty much 520 vehicles going through. So, you know, the traffic flowed well overall with 2 lanes. Going to 1 lane, you're going to have a problem, and especially considering vehicles coming in from the side streets. I don't know if all the references to option 1 and by the pros will and the recommendation for the AAAs is going to have any impact on the ultimate decisions, but I'll just leave. Yeah. Oh, okay. Most of those pros were coming from the Greater Victoria Cycling Coalition, and I guess I was also wondering to what extent the people that were in support of it and promoting option 1 and the AAA, how many were in fact Oak Bay residents and pay taxes like I do. Okay, so I don't think I have anything more to say on that. So, thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. And we did get your letter in our package, so thank you very much. If you can write down your name and your area on the piece of paper, and then you can say it out loud for us. Thank you. you can just turn the mic on, the red button. No, on the microphone itself. It is. Right, the gray button. Yeah.
This thumb. I was at this thumb. I think some of you already know my name. My name is Jane Van Horn. I have been I've been a resident of Oak Bay for over 25 years. I'm a cyclist, I'm a driver. I'm also a member of the Greater Victoria Cycling Coalition. And I am speaking today. I've written already, and I've written many times and spoken in front of this council many times. And as a resident and a cyclist, I have to tell you, I'm totally frustrated with the inactivity of this council. And this is the third council I've been speaking to regarding cycling issues, from Henderson to whatever. And now we're talking about a short little jog on a road, finally, for some cycling infrastructure. Oak Bay is vastly behind in the planning, well, I shouldn't say in the planning for, I've been a part of plans with the Transportation Alliance. All of these plans have come to fruition before this council. And there's even been suggestions for the funding that went with those suggestions, and still nothing happens. So I urgently beg of you, please listen to the cyclists that have been writing to you in this agenda, the cyclists in this room, most of which are also residents of Oak Bay, and action something for cyclists. You are ignoring 10%, at least 10% of the residents in Oak Bay. We know that from the Cycling Coalition and Bike to Work statistics, that's the amount of people that cycle to work. Incidentally, the highest number of people that cycle to work come from Oak Bay, and we're not being served in this community. We're not being served in this community at all. When I want to go for a recreational cycle, I go to Saanich. I take the ENN, the lovely new ENN, but I can't do it in Oak Bay because there isn't any dedicated things. I feel ignored as a cyclist. And now we're talking about we haven't even started to talk about pedestrians, the people that I see walking in my community, and the students I see walking down Foul Bay, and some of the dreadful sidewalks we have along there. So there's an even bigger segment of this population in Oak Bay that are being ignored. And it's time they were addressed. Well over time they were addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to come forward and speak? Oh. It's okay.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity to speak to the committee. My name is Diane Cunningham. I am a resident of Florence Street, as is David Lindsay, and I very much support his comments and concerns and observations. I too am a cyclist, and I really enjoy cycling, and I look forward to bike lanes. I am concerned, though, about the lack of information, as David mentioned, in the feasibility study, because it was based on models on traffic coming out of Florence Street in the mornings. It is significant, and I am also concerned about people diverting off of Foul Bay because they've lost a traffic lane. I really feel that Florence, Epworth, and those other streets are going to have significant traffic. We already have, as David mentioned, traffic down Florence avoiding the lights and avoiding the left turns onto Foul Bay. I really think people are going to be looking for shortcuts to try and get to work faster, get to school faster. So I hope that in this plan there might be a way to include barriers, signs, some way to discourage people from using the residential side streets as traffic lanes. They are meant to be residential streets. We really love our residential streets, and we don't want them to become arterial roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Anyone else like to come forward?
It's on. Okay, Gerald Smeltzer. I'll write my name on the chart here.
Thank you, Mr. Schmeltzer.
I'm a resident in Oak Bay. I have just two comments, three, I guess. The council will be familiar with me. I was the chair of the first Active Transportation Advisory Committee appointed in Oak Bay. And you might recall one of our recommendations, there were 11 members on our committee selected by the council and appointed, all Oak Bay residents. And one of our 4 priority projects at that time was to address the issue that's before you tonight. So I would agree. I think you've got a current backlog of enthusiasm for the project, and it is reflected in the OCP, and it was reflected in the recommendations made by that previous advisory committee. In terms of current stats and figures, I think that should guide your decisions ultimately in this project. It should be evidence-based in that sense, and I would suggest that you have a success on your hands in the terms of this new facility. Not only is it a new high school, but obviously it's the neighborhood learning center. It's new recreational opportunities for our soccer players and for a wide variety of people, plus it's a new theater. And so the letter that I wrote had 2 photographs in it. And I did that with some help, and we went and counted the number of bicycles on October 6th at the high school. And again, that's not only the high school, it's all those other facilities. Basically, compared to the stats before construction started, the number of bicyclists have doubled. There was 172 bikes jammed into all of the bike racks on October 6th. And plus a whole bunch of bikes locked somewhat inadequately to the various fences. So I think you've already built a wonderful facility there with the school, and you've got the partnership agreement for it. You're attracting people more and more to that facility. And one of the best ways to get them there and perhaps lower the traffic is more cyclists and more walkers. And I sympathize with the problems of the turning down Florence Street. I would just remind council, I'm sure Dan Horan, the engineer, is familiar with it. Similar problems existed just off of Lansdowne, across from Lansdowne School, Camosun College. And I know the mayor has seen this. Some of those streets have been made into one-way streets, and depending on traffic volumes, et cetera. And that's one way in which Saanich has dealt with that kind of overload on residential streets with people wanting to make cut-throughs. So there are solutions out there, I think, to be considered. So once again, great project and great plans, and I wish you proceed. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Schmelzer. Anyone else wish to come forward? Okay, seeing no one. Okay, as soon as I say that, they all jump up. Mr. Berger.
It's been a while since I've been here. Corey Berger. I am actually a township of Esquimalt resident. I'm here today. I'm the Policy and Infrastructure Chair for the Greater Victoria Cycling Coalition. I wanted to talk a little bit about this plan. We're very excited. It's been a while, as some of the previous people have mentioned, since Oak Bay's built a new bike lane. And you know, you do hold host to a number of places that have a lot of attraction to bicyclists, one of which is Oak Bay High. There's UVic as well. So I wanted to comment a little bit about some of the details specific to the plan. So the terms of reference, the feasibility report for that, we found it a little bit short. The terms of reference, you know, although Mr. Horan mentioned the PCMP and the Complete Streets Policy, which was then carried into the OCP, those weren't included in the terms of reference that Opus did, which we found very strange. So one of the consequences of that is when you read the feasibility report, there's a lot of discussion about the impacts on motor vehicles. There's a lot of discussion about delay, about those kinds of things. There is no discussion about the impacts of the choices of the type of bike lane you build on who's going to ride. And one of the things that's very important is to understand is that the PCMP is an outdated document. The PCMP was crafted in 2009 and 2010. In bicycle design terms, that might as well be the Paleolithic or the Jurassic period. We have come a significant distance since then. And one of the things that's happened is that we've discovered that although the PCMP says that a buffered bike lane and a protected bike lane are equivalent, when you actually go out and measure the impacts of those, when you talk to people about whether or not they will ride in those facilities, they're actually not. A protected bike lane is about twice as attractive as a buffered bike lane is in attracting new people to ride. And it's more attractive to that group which you're trying to get on bikes that aren't already out there. We're talking about kids, we're talking about parents, people who are starting to age out and are more concerned about riding in traffic now. So to be aware that, you know, although the PCMP is a good document of its time, next year the CRD is about to embark on a process to redesign, to redo the design guidelines because they're out of date. So when you go back to the feasibility report, you see that what we need to look at is what are the impacts of your choices? And the impacts are, if you build a lower quality facility, you're going to get less people biking. And the end consequence of that is you will have more people driving, which will be this double vicious circle. Now you have more queuing, more emissions, less attractive biking facility, and less people biking, which isn't good for anybody. We'd also like to comment, we noted a few of the design features need a little bit of work. One of the features, as was mentioned by one of the councillors, you switch from a parking protected bike lane to a bike lane outside of parking. And there's been a number of pieces of research in this. In fact, in 2016, the provincial health officer released a report called When the Rubber Meets the Road. And what it looked at is, what will it take for the province of British Columbia to go to a state where nobody dies on the road? It's called Vision Zero. It's been very successful in Sweden. And mostly it's looking at how do we change the road so that people, when they make mistakes, it doesn't kill people. And one of the pieces that comes out of that report is, one, build protected bike lanes because they're enormously effective in protecting people from motor vehicles. That's why they're called protected bike lanes. But it also says, don't build bike lanes outside of parking, because bike lanes outside of parking, as proposed in this plan, as you see all over our region and in fact far beyond, are push people between a moving motor vehicle and a parked motoring vehicle, and many people get doored as a consequence. So we'd urge you, use modern research. The new Transportation Association of Canada has just come out with new design guidelines 3 or 4 months ago. Bring that in. That includes protected bike lanes. Bring in research from the public health officer and others, and come back and build an all ages and abilities bike lane which will help with your traffic problems. And we also read the comments about the local streets and people diverting off of them. It is a concern. It is something that can be looked at in conjunction with the bike lane, but it definitely shouldn't be considered something to stop the bike lane. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. And I think I saw one more person wanting to come forward.
People stopped writing. My name is Christina Smith. It's my first time at a council meeting. This project's going to impact me greatly, personally, as a cyclist, a mother of 2 young children that goes to Willows, and a resident of the corner of Epworth Street and Cadboro Bay Road. I would love to see bike lanes. I would love to cycle more places with my 2 children. I certainly don't feel safe on the streets around me. I do have the same concerns as my fellow residents in the area about traffic diverting onto side streets. I do like the suggestion of the one-way streets. I do like that somebody's attacking it proactively because, to be honest, I feel like there's a bit of a brush off in this room. Oh, you're going to lose 29, 31 parking spaces, but that'll sort itself out. Oh yeah, there's going to be more problems on the side streets. Oh well, that'll sort itself out. We're already having huge problems. Bylaw is gone at 3:30 if they even get to your house, and when I get home with my kids and my groceries, there's nowhere to park. It's getting very difficult around there. So that's just for me as my day-to-day life. But in terms of pure traffic safety, I do have a couple concerns. Number one, there is already a huge amount of visual noise at the Epworth and Cadboro Bay intersection. By visual noise, I mean you've got a crosswalk here, you've got kids here, you've got cars parked up to here, you've got people going into and out of the high school, and people coming up from the traffic lights with two various stops trying to make through the next light. Plus, you've got to the east of me what I consider to be an effectively blind corner. I am hit, or I feel like I'm going to be hit probably 2 out of every 3 times I try to leave my street if there is a car coming around that corner doing more than 30 kilometers an hour. I would have a great concern for a cyclist coming around that corner at more than 30 kilometers an hour, which I know that a lot of them can do. I would want to make sure that for me to come out of Epworth Street, I had adequate visibility. I need to be able to see that cyclist, because if I turn to this visual noise over here for 1 second to attend to a high school student deciding to make the dash across the street and the cyclist comes out of nowhere, nobody wins. Nobody wins. So basically, those are my concerns. It's the speed at which people are already traveling on that road. I would think if we're going to put bike lanes in that area to protect all the people involved, there should be some serious consideration of reducing the speed on that whole stretch to 30 at all times. If you try to get out of one of those streets, you'll understand how difficult it is to be able to keep everybody safe. Anyway, that was probably a bit of a mishmash, but I'm speaking, I'm nervous, and hopefully I got my points across. I would like to see these bike lanes done, but I would like to see them done safely and without a disregard for the residents that live on these streets, because I feel like that's a little bit of an undertone here, is that we need to give up our quality of life for the greater good, and I think that some effort should be made to ensure that we don't have to be the ones that trade off in order for us also to win with a bike lane. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ms. Smith. Anyone else want to come forward? Okay, if no one else is coming forward, then, okay, this is the last time I'm going to do this.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. My name is Andrew Appleton, 2226 Windsor Road, Oak Bay. I can't really speak to the technical aspects of the project much better than Mr. Berger did, but I will echo the many members of the public that provided correspondence to council supporting the bike lane in general and supporting the idea of an all ages and abilities bike lane specifically. I'm an Oak Bay resident. I commute down Pandora on the new lane daily in both directions. And I think I actually like the language in Mr. Horan's note, basically referring to the courageous and intrepid bike commuters. And I guess I would probably fall in that category. I've been commuting for about 10 years by bike full time. And as a regular bike commuter, I was using Pandora before it was converted into a protected bike lane, and now use it as a protected bike lane. There's nothing more satisfying than watching people use a bike lane that have not used it before. So these courageous and intrepid folks who were on Pandora before. And now I see kids riding to school, I see families. I have a coworker or a worker in my building who uses his hand bike. Now he can use his hand bike to get to work. So there is a clear and concrete positive impact from an all ages and abilities cycle track. So I just want you to know that there is evidence and solid information on this in Victoria now, excuse me. And moving forward, just to close off, I would make the general statement that adaptability is going to be key for bike lanes in Oak Bay. A modern, developing municipality is evolving to have bike lanes. I mean, really, this is really not an optional element anymore. This is a key component of a complete and sustainable community. And I encourage you to be flexible, open-minded, and always looking for opportunities to put this type of infrastructure in place anytime this topic comes up. Oak Bay has a variety of streets that, of course, we originally were sometimes not designed with this sort of thing in mind. It doesn't mean that it can't happen. So I'd encourage you to be creative in that respect.
Thanks, Mr. Appleton. Okay, this is the last time I'm going to ask. So if anyone would like to come forward for the first time or the second time, please feel free. Thanks, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you. I just have a couple of comments. Oak Bay has implemented a regional or a district cycling path plan. I think it's in your community document. I think that Holtane is a very good road that could be encouraged to be used rather than Cadboro Bay Road for the recreational cyclists. And there are many cyclists that do use that already and use Florence and Epworth, but I think it could be further encouraged and vehicles discouraged. There was some comment about pedestrians being ignored along sitting there this morning and seeing hundreds of kids, I guess, coming along and offloading from buses generally in large packets. They made their way very successfully across B Street, Florence Street, and into school. And come 8:30, there was just the odd straggler. If my son was still at school, he'd be one of them. Also, when I was sitting there, it was amazing the number of vehicles that were going through red lights, the red lights, yeah. And but so I don't know what can be done or what would happen if you went to a single lane along there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now what I would like to do is like to ask Mr. Haran to come back and answer. Oh, you're right here. You sneaky. That was amazing. Okay, so I know there was a lot of questions that came up or comments that perhaps you would like to comment on yourself.
Through the chair, I will say there was quite a bit of feedback, and I took notes. Thankfully, a lot of the folks that came to speak today had already written letters. Excuse me, and I think it's worth saying out loud that from the staff perspective, we didn't look at the feedback in terms of majority. We looked at every single letter and took it as in terms of paid attention to what it was saying and factored that into our broader where we're going forward in terms of analysis of what's happening in that area.
So perhaps I can ask one question that was commented on, and that would be the traffic coming out of Florence Street. So can you comment on whether or not that we do have any statistics on the number of cars that go in and out of Florence Street?
Chair, we're not aware of exactly how old our studies are. We usually have data for everywhere in the district. The question is how up to date it is. So we'll go back and look at what our recent studies are. I will say that Mr. Ding and I, after we saw the feedback from the residents that raised the concerns, we immediately started, talking about, okay, well, what are we going to do now in terms of looking at the impacts?
Thank you. And then there was one thing that Mr. Berger brought up, and that was about the CRD is redoing the design guidelines. And how will that change? I mean, if we're following the guidelines that are out there already, if they come up with new design guidelines, does that mean that we would kind of be putting the cart before the horse if we design on the old guidelines?
So I think it's important to note that we've done the most we can do with the room that we have. So we very much, and there's the slide, one of my slides, it says at the beginning, the goal is all ages, all abilities. Right. And that's what we tried to deliver. And there's just some places where that won't be possible. So we've done the best we can with what's available. There's potential that, in the future, that's the design guidelines change, that they'll be categorized differently in what's preferred and what the goals are, but that doesn't change the width of the road and doesn't change what we can do there in terms of the lane widths for the bikes, for the buffers, and for the traffic.
Thank you. Okay, so any comments from around the table? Mayor Jensen.
Mr. Haran, through you, Chair, there was a number of concerns about cut-throughs. What kind of techniques could you suggest to deal with that? I think Mr. Berger, when he spoke, he acknowledged that is a concern, but it can could, in his view, and should be dealt with separately. So if we were to deal with it separately, what are the techniques that we could employ?
Through you, Chair, I think there are other areas in other municipalities nearby where you can see, whether it's traffic calming or traffic diversion techniques. Haltane is a good example. These are some things that could be done. I'm not saying that we recommend doing them in these cases. I think staff would need to take it away, study the traffic patterns, try to assess what the options are and what the impacts might be for those options.
Just to follow up, I seem to recall as you're coming down towards Oak Bay, just before you come from the Village Walk, there's a little sushi restaurant on the right, and then there's a Village Walk just beyond that side street. And there seems to be a no right-hand turn at some times. And I assume that that's to avoid the cut-through, people wanting to avoid the lights at Foul Bay and Oak Bay Avenue as you're coming down there. So I assume techniques like that would be something that could be considered, and focusing them on the problem times, and they tend to be the times that people are, it's the rush hour in the morning and rush hour in the afternoon, although I think in Oak Bay they tend to be rush minutes rather than hours. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Zelka.
Thank you so much, Chair. Again, thank you for your very thorough report. I wanted to just confirm a couple of assumptions, please, in the report. Does this report assume that it's 40 kilometers an hour throughout the entire portion of Cadboro Bay with 30 in school time?
So through you, Chair, I'll just repeat in the mic so that it's picked up. We believe that the study, the feasibility study, was done with the assumptions of the pre-speed study speed limits, which was 30 kilometers an hour during school hours and 50 kilometers an hour at other times.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. I wanted to also ask, in some designs in other municipalities, and I can recall I was in Toronto once, and I nearly got hit by a bicyclist because the bike lane was a two-way bike lane, and I had no experience with this before. This design assumes that all bike lanes along the stretch are only one way. I just want to confirm that.
Through the Chair, that's correct. The bike lanes on the north side of Cadboro Bay Road are westbound lanes, and the bike lanes proposed for the south side of Cadboro Bay Road are eastbound lanes.
Excellent, thank you. Continuing, in terms of a separation of the vehicle traffic from the bikes, I believe I understand that. But what about separation of the bicycles from the pedestrians? If you could please speak to that. I know pedestrians, you said, were out of scope, but there needs to be some sort of separation with that traffic as well, please. If you could maybe touch on that, please.
Through the Chair, I'm not an expert on the design guidelines, but I believe that the reason why the width of the bike lane is as wide as it is to allow some space between the bike lanes that are directly adjacent to the gutter and then the curb and then the sidewalk. So there's some space there.
So the actual gutter itself, and I guess the stormwater collection facilities that are along there as well will help with the separation.
Through the Chair, that's correct. Yeah, the curb. So you have the gutter, which collects the stormwater, and the catch basins in there, and then the curb, and then the sidewalk itself that goes.
Excellent. That's very helpful. And I did check the CRD website in terms of the traffic counts along Cadboro Bay, and the last time the CRD was kind enough to help us with the traffic count along Cadboro Bay was 2013. That's unfortunately the earliest date that they show for traffic counts along there.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments to make? Councillor Kirby.
I have a couple of questions. Were bike parking facilities and the bus stops, the changes to the bus stops, were those discussions included with, did you reach out to the school district? I think somebody asked about talking about negotiation of augmenting the space.
with discussions with the school district, but did we talk to them about the location of the bus stops as well as augmenting of bike parking at the Oak Bay High site?
Through the chair, so two issues there. I think just to clarify, there's a question about the location of bus stops, and then there's a separate question about
yes,
end of facility, like biking facilities.
Yeah.
Or end of trip biking facilities. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Okay. So the first thing is in terms of bike, or correction, sorry.
Bus stops?
My brain just stopped working right at that moment. Bus stops.
Yes.
There was not discussions about changes or moving bus stops was not part of the scope of this particular project. We do regularly discuss bus stop movement and every year as we go through. And as I was mentioning earlier to a question from Councillor Murdoch related to the rights of way, the locations of the bus stop that are currently there, the new ones, was the district was involved in figuring out where they're going to be and where they are. So that's the first question.
On the south side, but not on the north side hasn't been replaced yet.
That's correct. I think you're correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And then so I guess the answer is no to both questions, but the separate reasons why there was no discussion in terms of the scope of this project about where the bikes would be parked in terms of where these bike lanes are and so on.
I just know that there was a photo submitted to show the number of cyclists already that are at Oak Bay High and using the NLC, and as partners with the high school on the NLC, as you know, with the rec center being the other occupant of that space, I feel it's our responsibility also to consider augmenting the bike parking. And we did discuss this when the design of the high school was taking place, and I was very pleased to see covered parking included for the students after much debate and discussion, because there was initially only covered bike parking for the staff at the back of the building, and then they added that beautiful parking in the front as a measure to placate Oak Bay Council, and then but it's still not large enough. It's always got it's always full, and there's always bikes along the fences, which I can only imagine is not going to help them last very long, and it will start to wreck the beautiful new infrastructure we've just built there if we don't address that soon. And also, what kind of message does it send, right, to the community, to the students that are riding their bikes, that I think we should offer them that level of respect that their bikes can be covered, and we appreciate that they're using another mode to get to school and reducing the traffic on our streets, the vehicle traffic, sorry. So that's just something I think is an important part of this design and discussion should be, and if we're talking about parking a lot about cars, we should, if we're trying to improve the facilities for cyclists, we should also remember that we need a place for them to park when they get there. Particularly, I noticed we need covered parking or secured adequate parking for families, because there are more and more families using cargo bikes or large trailers that are going to the childcare facilities and preschool at the NLC. So it'd be really nice if we include that in the design. I don't think that was contemplated when the school district was looking at the designs for the property. They didn't include that expectation that families would be cycling there with small children. So the design will have to be a little bit different for those large bikes. The other thing I was going to ask about is I think I've spoken with the police, and I think we've heard several times in our meetings with the police about traffic safety and enforcement on that stretch, and that we know that they are there almost daily with trying to enforce speed limits. Will this design, either one, reduce the speeds and encourage people to comply with the 30-kilometer speed limit in that area? And will it reduce the number of people blowing the red light at Florence?
Through the chair, it's very difficult for me to make a predictive assessment of whether it will. I think maybe the answer you're looking for is that what we consider as we looked at the intersection down at Bowker and then this whole stretch all the way to Foul Bay Road, as we narrow the streets, as we increase what the drivers need to pay attention to in terms of the green treatment, the conflict zones, we turn it from a street where drivers feel that there's a lot of room for themselves to a place where they need to, where they're more constrained. And so this is a traffic calming measure, these proposed bike lanes. So our hope is that the impact it will change driver behavior in a positive way.
Great, thank you. Like a road diet, right? Okay, and then I think the other only other aspect I was concerned about, I mean, aside from what's been talked about with Florence and Epworth and the traffic and parking concerns, was can we include repair and replacement of the north side sidewalks? Because I mean, I'm just wondering if that's. I know you guys have that fabulous spreadsheet where you knock off, the highest priority sidewalks for replacement and repair. There's serious disrepair of the north side sidewalks, and there's a section where it's extremely narrow, and all the power poles are smack in the middle of the sidewalk, and there's shrubbery and trees that are growing into the sidewalk. So I'm hoping that as part of this improvement, that we can encourage the apartments along that north side to cooperate with us and work together to improve the sidewalks on that side, because there's a huge amount of traffic there, like pedestrian traffic, and I feel like the crossing at Cadboro Bay and Cranmore is shaded by the trees. There's a lot of there's a power pole there. There's just not a lot of good visibility. I know that removing the cars from that side, I think that the cars will be removed with this bike lane being installed, so that there will be more visibility of the crossing. But I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity for us to see improvements there, and whether we can work in cooperation with the apartment owners to maybe take a little space and widen the sidewalk and make some improvements there.
Through the chair, I think that in terms of the sidewalk, the state of the sidewalk, and what should be done about that, we can take it away and have another look for the purposes of assessing its condition and putting it in the priority based on anything else, other sidewalks that are in worse condition. The implication there is that they're also need to be dealt with more quickly. So we can definitely have a look at where that stretch fits in the priorities and come back to you with just a sense of where it fits in the grand scheme.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment? Councillor Murdoch.
Well, just in the interest of time, we're an hour and a half in and wanting to get to some sort of thing moving forward. I do think that the comments that we're not talking about today, but just continuing these up past Willows up to the next commercial center makes a lot of sense. I think that's we need to get there as well. I want to just acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of priorities for active transportation in the community. We don't have curb drops for people who have wheelchairs that can't just get around their own neighborhoods and so forth. There's a lot of priorities and limited funds, so I'd like to just do something and get it done and get to all the other priorities as well. I also recognize that we have some really great biking community in many ways. Our little back streets are so fantastic for getting around that it's we tend to avoid. I have two small children. They've biked around this community since the age of 4, and we've done it on the back roads for the most part. It does not mean that we shouldn't address these on these major roads, particularly around school. So I think we just need to do it. I'm glad that we're getting to it. It certainly drives me crazy as a cyclist coming to along bike lanes and having them suddenly disappear and then reappear some random time later. It's probably my most the scariest thing, I think, as a cyclist, is to suddenly realize there's no protection at all and there's no control. Of the two options, my preference is actually option 2. I think that it flows into the sort of the way that people actually ride. And again, I guess I look at that from two standpoints. If we had a full AAA separated bike model, that is the best. I'm not convinced that a halfway measure is safer than the other option, just in terms of actual real-time use. And part of that is just, again, I have kids that are still young enough. I remember having to heave and haul them out of bike chairs and so forth on that passenger side. And as a cyclist, one of the problems with engineering cycling, as everybody here who cycles knows, there's a huge range, right? We have people with small children going along at 5 or 6 kilometers an hour, and we have people who are riding along at 50 kilometers an hour. And trying to accommodate a single bike lane for all those people is very difficult. And constraining them, in a reasonably, granted these are wider than the minimum requirement, but they're not terribly wide for accommodating all of those. So there's a very good chance that the fast cyclists are still going to be on the road, and we're going to have some going behind the cars and then some coming out. I think if we could standardize it, they were all the same, I'd be okay with the option 1, but we can't. So I'm really thinking that option 2 is a better option for that. Although I remain to be, someone can convince me differently, that would be one thing. The other thing is really, we're talking about, it's addressed in here, the snow removal issue. And if we want to make these usable year-round, we are a biking community year-round. The argument here is, well, we could buy new equipment and plow them with the specialized equipment. But let's be realistic here. It's not the equipment that's so much the issue, it's the people. And there's a snowstorm. We're scrambling to keep up with just getting people on the streets to do the plowing and so forth. So the chances of us actually going out with a specialized piece of equipment and just tackling this one little strip of the place that's protected is probably pretty slim. Where realistically, it's Cadboro Bay Road. It's a major thoroughfare. We'll actually get to it early on the very first day if they're part of the conjoined pieces. So I think from a practicality standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, it makes a lot more sense for us to just have them where they're actually accessible. I grant that is not the gold standard, but I'm sometimes worried that we get the perfect is the enemy of the good, and I'd rather go for good and done and moving on at this point than having it delayed. I also am, as a cyclist, aware of the dangers of curbs, and I don't like when you're caught in between up against curbs. I think the points I raised in my questions about the turning pieces for the vehicles going into the school, onto B Street, and coming out of the side streets, I think those really do need to be addressed. I think we have to think a bit more thoroughly about what those road designs are to make sure that the traffic can flow and they're not being held up and people aren't so frustrated that they're gunning through the red lights to get through. But I think that can be done. And if I had my druthers here, I'd like to see us move forward with option 2 right away, as fast as reasonably possible. I think we have to put a little bit more thought, though, into the concerns of the neighbors and what the heck is going to happen with all those cars and what's going to happen with the traffic, because I don't feel comfortable at this point that it's just going to work itself out. I think there has to be some more thought in terms of who's parking where and where they're going to go. But I do want to give I appreciate we're not making the decision here, but if I was giving direction, that would be my comfort, that we move forward with option 2, that we allow staff to go and look at some of the details and come back to us with those
Is
costs.
that a motion that you're making?
Oh, sure, I'll make that motion.
Okay, second.
Maybe a little early. Okay, the motion's on the table. I mean, there's lots of time for discussion here.
Okay, so discussion on the motion. Mayor
More of a
Jensen.
question. So the recommendation by staff, and this is really through you to Mr. Haran, is that you're recommending option 1. Is that the way I properly read your report? I think it's fairly straightforward. I'm just going to try to pull up your presentation. Oops.
So, Mr. Haran.
Through you, Chair, the report recognizes that option 1 and option 2 are very similar, and from a staff perspective, we recommended option 1 with the intent that it would be as close to the all ages, all abilities kind of standard, but definitely within the discussion that's happened today, there's flexibility between the two. It doesn't mean that option 2 is not a viable option, which is why during the presentation we presented it as very similar and both feasible to meet the aims.
Maybe, Madam Chair, if we could pull up the presentation, would that be possible?
Yes.
And So, and particularly slide 4, that one. So, and again, it's just clarifying what the direction is. So, I think it's your position that partially protected lanes are generally preferable to buffered lanes. Is that what I took from this presentation?
Through you, Chair, I think this really does come down to a matter of council's view on what is most important. So what we presented are 2 options that are safe, that meet the general guidelines of the Class 1 facilities, and yeah.
Okay. If you could go to the next slide, then slide 5. So just so I understand it. So buffered lanes is, as you go to the right in this matrix or this slide, the safety improves as the color goes from yellow to kind of green to blue. Is that fair?
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure that you can make that distinction. It's very difficult to decide. I don't think it's as straightforward as saying the further right you go, the safer it is. I think that each one of those options has transition zones where bicycles are crossing where vehicles are. So I don't know if we're prepared to make a statement about which ones across that Class 1 spectrum are safer.
Okay. And the difference, though, in some parts of option 1 is that there are some areas that are protected with parked cars?
Through the Chair, that's correct. Option 1, there are some areas that have parking protected bike lanes.
All right. Thank you. And if I could comment after hearing those answers, I think the more protection there is for cyclists and the greater sense of security they have, the more cyclists we will see. One of the goals is all ages, all access. And in my view, the more you can protect the lanes, even though they aren't perfectly protected all the way through, the more cyclists you're going to get. And that's why certainly I'm leaning towards option 1 as it's been described as a protected lane rather than a buffered lane. And having biked on lots of both, certainly the ones that I've personally felt most secure in are the protected lanes. And I think all ages would feel that way too. So I personally see, and I take Mr. Horan's point, it is a bit of a decision for council. I would err on the side of greater security and greater sense of security by having them protected. So I would certainly lean towards option 1. Thank you. As opposed to option 2, which is just buffeted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby.
This is again, my first question was about if we could place something in those buffers, then it would become a protected lane, right? And so I'm rather than just having painted hash marks on the concrete or on the pavement, could we place something in that space to make it a physical barrier between my child and a car? So that's where I'm hoping there could be some flexibility with the design, because honestly, I looked at both very carefully, and I couldn't determine which one would feel safer, because neither one really has that physical barrier to protect me or my child from a car. And so, and I think honestly, this is something that I don't think anybody will disagree with, that it feels safer if you're driving, if you're a cyclist, or if you're a pedestrian, to have everybody separated by a protected lane, like by a physical barrier. Everybody feels a little bit safer, and including the car driver who's nervous about a cyclist coming out into the lane accidentally, right? Because that could happen. And my daughter is an excellent cyclist, but at times loses concentration and can kind of swerve out. And this, you know, if she were to hit the curb, I'd rather that than her hit a car. So I think the curb is the safest option, or if there's no ability to put a curb instead of the hashed paint lines, then maybe some planters or something, some of those posts that we've seen in the beginning of the bike lanes on Pandora, just as you're entering the coming down the hill. And they're just getting started. They've put in some posts because people were just shifting off into the bike lane, preparing to turn right at the Max or whatever the corner is there at Welburns. So there's lots of different treatments, and so I don't honestly care, option 1 or option 2. I will support either one, but if we can please make sure that they are as protected as possible. I mean, everybody's talked in almost all 66 pages of letters we received. Almost, I think there were 2 that didn't mention all ages and abilities, the AAA standard that Vancouver's come up with. And I think if we're going to encourage more kids to cycle to Willows and reduce the traffic around for the neighborhood around Willows, all the neighboring streets complain about parking and traffic, and I'm sure you guys would love to see a reduction in the number of calls you receive to your bylaw officer and just receive, period, about parking and traffic congestion and conflicts around Willows School and around the high school. I think this would go a long way to making that possible. They've just completed their HASTE, the Hub for Active School Travel assessment last year. They're all raring to go. Those the bike racks that have been installed at the school, thanks to the Kiwanis Club, are full. But we want to see them even fuller and more overflowing all year round. And if we can do whatever we can to encourage those kids to cycle. I mean, the only way I would let my kids cycle at that age would have been if there was a protected cycle lane. And even now at middle school and high school, I still worry about their safety even in Little Oak Bay because of the lack of protected lanes. So that's my concern. I will support either option. I thought initially that we were going to go with option 1 because that was the voice we heard from the community loud and clear. But so I'd be happy to support either one, though.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. What motivated me to support the option 2 had to do with my own personal experience with respect to biking next to parked cars and treating a parked car as a level of protection. I take a different perspective, having unfortunately been doored. Any cyclist knows what it means to be doored. To me, not having a car as a protective barrier is preferable. So that was one a reason why option 2 looks more appealing to me from a safety perspective. I do note that it was suggested that the CRD will be coming up with some new design guidelines in the future, and because of the similarity of these 2 designs, to a large extent, the designs are virtually identical. So the Cycling Coalition must be very happy that we're going to be proceeding with something, which is great. And I know many residents are very happy about this. However, I seem to feel that option 2 gives us an option, gives us the ability to consider future design guidelines or future design modifications so that this design could potentially be adjusted in the future. To incorporate some new considerations, maybe something that will allow a barrier on a much more narrow buffered strip. I understand our buffered strip is a little bit thinner, a little bit smaller than the design guidelines call for. So that was the second reason why I was leaning towards that. I also note that the statistics say that only 8% of Oak Bay residents are cyclists, and that in terms of commuting to work to downtown. And the numbers that were quoted to us today, ad hoc numbers, I'll admit, with 13 bikes versus 520 cars, sort of tend to reflect the statistics that the CRD espoused in terms of consistent cyclists within Oak Bay who commute to work. So that would be the reasons that motivated me. The last item I wanted to share is the piece around the equipment, our current level of equipment and capabilities when it's time to clear these lanes. You know, just being arbiters of the and protectors of the public purse. I would prefer not to have to buy new equipment to be able to clear a special lane that has some measure of physical protection, where our current levels of equipment can't clear that today. So once we get the new equipment, I'm sure by then we might have the options of putting in actual barriers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croft.
Thank you. To you, Chair. One of the things that's not clear to me is what is the total distance of cycle track on this proposed facility option number 1? Because there seems to be different areas that are buffered and others aren't buffered. And in relation to the whole amount that we're doing here, whatever it is, 1 kilometer or 1.5 kilometers or whatever it is, how much of it is actually buffered?
Mr. Horan.
Through you, Chair, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I would need to go away and look at the drawings to count it up. It's if you look at the drawings, you can see that there's, in terms of you can do estimates by how many lengths of cars there are. There's not a lot of protected bike lane there. Yep.
So there seems to be 3, maybe 4 small sections is what is actually buffered. Just a guess.
Yeah, through you, Chair, we would have to take a few moments to look at the drawing to give you an actual number, but just based on the drawing up there, you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not too many parking spots up there.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that having seen that slide and asking that question, that I support option number 2.
Thank you. Councillor Ney.
Well, my question was along that lines, because in your report through your chair to Mr. Horan, when I look at the on-street parking impacts, there's only the difference between option 1 and 2. There's only 2 car space differences. What I'm trying to figure out is how is it that now here's my question. Where is the parking on option 2 happen if it's not parking buffered? Is there any parking along there?
Through you, Chair, there's some parking on the north side, and we'd have to bring up the full drawing to point out where they are specifically. I think the biggest takeaway from both options is that in order to fit the bike lanes in that are proposed, we would be losing, like the way to make room for those bike lanes is to take away the parking that's already there.
Yeah, okay. Then the other question I have, this would actually be along the lines of where Councillor Kirby was going around wanting some kind of buffer there, like you have in the in your presentation. I think it's the last option, isn't it? The one furthest to the right on the feasible options available. The one furthest to the right, it has no parking buffered lane, but it's got a green space, like it looks like planters or something. Is that right?
So I'm going to stay right here. The reason why I kept going back is my notebook and notes were over there, so I'm sitting here bouncing back. So
I think it's 6. It's the one with the, yeah.
This one.
So the one furthest to the right, for which we don't have a cost on either, because it wasn't one of the ones we were really looking at. But so that's not parking protected, right? It's not a parking protected bike lane. It's protected by a lane. Okay. So we're looking at option 1 and 2, which does not include that. But my question really is, we haven't got a cost for that, but can I ask you why that wouldn't have been proposed? Was it a cost issue for which we don't have the cost before us?
Through you, Chair. That's a good question. At this time, you have me stumped on that one. I'm not sure if Mr. Ding has insight on that. There's something about the cycle track protected with barrier that I don't have the answer. I'd have to go back and ask that question.
My final comment really is that the issue of safety, there's two components to it. There's one is the feeling of safety, and two, there is actual safety, like how many fewer conflicts would be result in any one of these options. And the question I have back to staff, as I understood it, we don't have any data on that. And I'm just wondering if there is data available, that hasn't yet been accessed, that shows the number of actual conflicts that would happen with any one of these few options. Is there one option here that would show a substantial difference or not? That's what I'm wondering, within the context of this proposal.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Ney, I just want to ask a question for clarification. Was your question, do we have data about which of these options are safer? Is that what you meant?
As measured by the feeling of safety and actual conflicts. Is that what you call that metric? What I mean is accidents.
Through you, Chair, I think this is another situation where I'll have to go back and ask the question. I'm not aware. I didn't see any in terms of the feasibility study, but that data may be there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, for the last time, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much. Is it fair to say, through you, Chair, to staff, that an intersection without a traffic control device, from an accident perspective, or has fewer accidents than an intersection with a traffic control device? My understanding from statistics is that once you put a traffic control device on an intersection, it actually increases the number of accidents.
Through you, Chair, I don't have those statistics, so I can't make a comment on that.
Councillor Kirby.
I just wanted to make one quick comment that the when the Active Transportation Advisory Committee was meeting many years ago, I think it was in my last term actually, we discussed the data and statistics when we gathered some information from ICBC, as well as what was then the new bikemaps.org, or that came from UVic, where they identified areas of concern, and so we brought that data in. We looked at the highest conflict zones or areas in the entire municipality, and that's how we focused our discussion and our goals for improvement. And the corner of Foul Bay and Fort was, I think, the second highest after the corner at Camosun and Foul Bay Road. So it's a very high conflict zone, and so I think this is a great idea.
Perfect, thank you. I just have a couple of comments before Councillor Murdoch.
I guess I just point out, I think all these questions are valid. We don't have bike lanes now, and it would be nice to have bike lanes. And if we're going to ask staff to spend a lot of time and energy doing a bunch of things, I mean, I don't think there's any question that putting bike lanes in is desirable. So really, just if we're all in agreement there, and I think we are, then can we not just kind of move this forward and have staff do that? And I think the only thing I would just add is, I think option 1 and option 2 are so darn similar, it almost makes no difference between the two. The only reason I suggest option 2 is for the two reasons I cited: the easier snow clearing and street cleaning, and the fact that I think the inconsistency of some cars, some intersections seeing bikes whizzing around on the right side and some seeing them on the left side, is just, to my mind, if it's all one, perfect. If it's all the other, perfect. But that sort of mixture, to my mind, is probably not a good engineering. But I think we just need to make a choice at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to quickly say my comments and then I'll call the question. So there's obviously a lot of questions that have come up tonight. My understanding is that if we did move ahead with option 2, that you would then be coming back to us with, to return to the Committee of the Whole with further information regarding alternates within that option that would address some of the questions that have come up tonight. So for example, the amount of traffic that goes down Florence, for example, or what's going to happen to those 31 cars that are now not going to be able to park along that space, because if I was a neighbor in that area, I would not want those cars to be pushing into my area. I want to know what's going to happen with that. And we have to remember, we're getting a very big development on the corner of Bowker and Cadboro Bay that does not have adequate, in my humble opinion, does not have adequate parking for the number of units that are in there. So there's going to be all of those cars that are going to be on the streets as well. So I really would like to know what we're looking at have happen for those parking spots. And then the other thing I would really like to see is when you come back is I'd like to see the proper placement of bus stops and driveways, especially around the school, because I think that's really important when that's a brand new bus stop right outside the high school. And from the drawings that I can see, it looks like it would be kind of in the way of the bike lane, and maybe it can be moved further up the street towards Cranmore, or where there's a little bit more room perhaps. But I think that having the proper drawings in front of us would really help us in moving this forward. So on that, Councillor Ney.
I just have one more comment, is to add to your list, and I do have a question too, but I would like to also know the information that of the questions that I posed most recently in the discussion. And I'd also like to know if we go forward with, let's say it's option 2 here, and let's say some other information came forward when staff brings this forward, do we still, I presume we still reserve the right to be able to make some alterations without significant impact, if that were the case, in terms of option?
I would say that's correct.
That's always an option. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So on that, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, so motion carries. Thank you very much, and I'm pretty sure the room is going to clear out. So we'll give you a moment to clear out before we start on with our next number. Okay, so we're about ready to go. Okay, so moving on the agenda, we are now moving on to the land use application sections. We have a total of 6 applications under the land use section before coming to Committee of the Whole. All applications have been through our advisory bodies for review and comment. So we're going to begin with the 2 siting and design applications of the committee, and the recommendations are going to be included in the adoption for the minutes of council meeting on October 23rd. So the first one is Uplands Siting and Design application for 2475 Lansdowne Road. We have here the Acting Director of Building and Planning, Ms. Jensen, and I would like you just to give a brief overview of this application, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for Upland Siting and Design approval. The applicant is proposing to modify the existing home by replacing a rear deck with stairs to directly access the backyard. expanding the front roof overhang, modifying the front window layout, and incorporating other finishing details into the home. The advisory design panel reviewed the application at their October 3rd meeting. They were generally supportive of the proposed modifications, noted a few suggestions which the applicant has taken into consideration. That was specifically due with some wood paneling at the bottom of the stairs and incorporating dark sky principles. So staff have also reviewed the application and suggest the amendments will not negatively impact the neighborhood character or streetscape and will result in a smaller building footprint and additional open space. So staff are now requesting council direction as to the options outlined in the report.
Thanks very much. And Mayor Jensen.
I was on the site visit this morning. I think I was the sum total of the tour other than staff. I think it's going to enhance the front of the building. It's not going to impact on the back neighbors, any changes there. If anything, there'll be a little bit less oversight, but it's fairly protected. So.
Thank you. So if there's any questions from the committee of staff before I ask if the applicant's
Move
here.
approval.
Is the applicant in attendance?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay. Are there any questions for the applicant? No? Okay. Councillor Ney? Now you can go.
Move approval.
Oh,
Seconded.
we also need to know if there's any thing from the public. No? Okay. So I have a motion on the floor. Any further questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So the next one, that was worth waiting for, I'm sure, is Uplands Siting and Design application for 3200 Uplands Road. And once again, we have Ms. Jensen going to give us an overview.
So for this design approval, the applicant is proposing to enclose the existing carport, which is attached to the house currently, and that is to expand the existing kitchen area and connect the existing detached garage to the house. Materials to be used for the renovation will match the existing home, and a new gable vent will be installed in the roof. The application was reviewed by the design panel at their October 3rd meeting. Again, the panel was supportive of the modifications with some suggested revisions also incorporated into the design. That specifically was the originally proposed cupola, which became the vent gable.
Thank you. And Mayor Jensen, I bet you were there.
We went to this one also, and if anything from the street side, it's going to improve the visual of the house. It's a very modest and well thought out plan.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Councillor Zalka.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'm sorry, I didn't find it in the drawings. What is the proposed coverage, site coverage, please, with the garage included?
With the garage included, the area for the garage and the carport is actually already incorporated into the floor area, so there's no increase from that particular component. There is about a 200 square foot increase between the area that's connecting the detached garage now to the home, as well as a glass roof area that they're putting on the rear terrace. So it's about a 200 square foot increase.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, are the applicants in attendance? Yes. Any questions for the applicants from the committee? No? Okay. Would the public like to make any comment? No? Okay. I'd
Move
entertain-
approval.
Thank
Second.
you. Moved and seconded. Any further comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. The next 4 items are development variance permits. If the committee determines that they're ready to proceed to council, notification will be undertaken following this meeting, and they will be finally considered at council on November 14th. The first one before us is development variant permit application for 2677 Lincoln Road, and we'll have a staff overview from Ms. Jensen.
Thank you, Chair. This application for a development variance permit is to permit construction of a below-grade stairwell along the south side of the house that's currently under construction. The home meets all requirements of the zoning bylaw, but variances are requested for the interior side yard setback along the side where the stairwell is proposed and the total of side lot lines. Variance is also requested for increased paved surface in the front yard in order to reorient the driveway to pull it away from an existing boulevard tree. The application was reviewed at the October 3rd meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission, who did not support the requested variances. Some discussion took place around the ability of new construction to meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw. Comments were also made that paved surface could be reduced as it is currently serving 3 parking spaces rather than the required 2. So staff have reviewed the application with respect to the characteristics of the site. The proposed layout would allow for safe access from the front to the rear yard through the continuous stairs and along the north side of the building. The driveway alignment does protect the boulevard tree. Excess paved surface could be reduced, but it is serving a parking space located outside of the front yard, and this would be permitted. Staff are requesting council direction with respect to the options.
Thank you. Any questions from committee? Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair, for staff. With respect to the comments from the Advisory Planning Commission, who recommended denying this, is it because it's a new construction that they suggested that it's essentially a greenfield situation where there's no reason for them not to follow the zoning bylaw as laid out?
I don't want to speak specifically to the members and what they were thinking was part of their discussion, but there were general comments around vacant sites and meeting zoning bylaw requirements.
Thank you. And can you please remind me, the 4A Review Committee made specific reference to side setbacks. Can you, I know I was on that committee, but it was too many years ago. Can you remind me why that's important?
The Floor Area Review Committee essentially covered a lot of territory. They were looking at floor area specifically, but they also looked at various types of buildings and setbacks. In this particular instance, they were looking at below-grade patios and stairs as to whether they would negatively impact adjacent properties with respect to stability, and then the opportunity for safe access from the front yard to the rear yard.
And last supplemental, if I may, please. Is there a concern with safe access to the backyard with the proposed setback, please?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Any further questions to staff? Okay. Is the applicant here? If you'd like to come forward. Are there any questions for the applicant from the committee? Councillor Murdoch.
Well, I guess the question is always why? Why is this being done after the fact? Why can't it be put into the backyard? Why wasn't it included in the original designs when it was put forward? All those sort of usual why questions attached. Thanks.
So I'd just like to give a bit of history.
If you can just, I know we all know who you are, but if you could, for the record, state who your name and
address? Is that it?
No, just municipality of resident.
Address, or sorry, Russ Collins from Oak Bay. So this design was actually submitted for building permit after we had actually had a conversation with Oak Bay staff about this staircase. I had a meeting, came in and talked about it and said, is there a variance, are we going to require a variance in this situation? And I was told no, that we were okay, it was fine, the way that we proposed it. The original driveway was proposed to come straight in, but would affect a tree on the boulevard. So I have a drawing here that demonstrates that. There's a straight-in driveway, and then the driveway to the side of the building here. And with the grass strips that we incorporated into that driveway, we're not over the 25% front yard paving. So the plans were submitted, and then we were told that there is a variance for the staircase, unfortunately. And we said, that's too bad, we didn't realize there was. That's why we came and talked about it ahead of time. So we changed our plan, removed the side staircase, and submitted it to Oak Bay for a permit, and we felt that we would just ask for a variance later because it seemed reasonable to us to ask for that variance, seeing we were told that it was okay and the plans were designed, finished, working drawings were done, we're in for permit, and now we have to try to get them some access into the basement. And really it's a safety issue as far as we're concerned. There's a family room down there, and it's just so that people, kids and so on, can get out of the basement safely. So
The other situation that happened is we were contacted by Oak Bay staff, Parks Department, to come and have a look at the tree in the boulevard and see if there was any way to accommodate keeping the tree. And so I spoke to my clients, and they agreed that if we tried to, if you see on the new proposal, curve the driveway around the tree in the boulevard, which is out here, that we could actually save that tree. But it made it very difficult to put grass divisions into the driveway at that point, and because it's so much more curving across the property, that we decided to just pave that area and ask for a variance for that too. So we were actually asked by Oak Bay staff to provide that, save that tree. And that's why we ended up here at this situation.
I guess it would be nice to have from staff to verify that chain of events. And the only other question I had for you was just, I noticed that all the trees planted are being planted on the sort of the south property line, where they will probably cast shadows on the neighbors more than on your property. Is there any thought of just putting those trees more on the north side of that property line, or is that for a specific reason? These are the 4 trees in the backyard, the 3 small and 1 medium, which probably won't actually cast much of a shadow, but.
Sorry, just looking for our, what trees are on the north end? Yeah, I thought we were planting our trees on the north property line, like on our.
You are, so the shadows will go to onto the neighbor's property at that point, right? They're not very big trees. I'm just curious if there was a reason for putting them on that side.
Not necessarily, just trying to, I guess we were asked about I forget what it's called, but the tree canopy bylaw that was passed recently. And it was something we weren't expecting because it was already in for permit. We just had this question, what are you going to do about trying to reach that goal that they have for the amount of tree canopy on the property without really having enough time to, talk to a proper landscape designer and so on. We just popped trees on here and said, here, that's what we're going to try.
That's good enough. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zelka?
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate being able to ask a couple of questions. The lot appears to slope down towards the backyard. I want to confirm that, first of all. The rear of the property seems to be lower than the front of the property?
I'd say a little, yeah. Yeah, slight.
I just wanted to ask, is it possible to relocate? I hear you say the stairs on the side, you say that there's a safety consideration. Could those stairs be relocated to the back of the property, making egress to the backyard potential? Just as some way of saving the side lot. Is that
it's not impossible, but like our client was her wish was to actually have a nice patio in the backyard that took up the back of the house and be able to flow out from the interior of the house that way. So we were hoping not to cut that up with an access. So that's why the side yard was chosen. I mean, up until very recently for us, I know that we've had conversations with staff, but we were unaware of the fact that the staircase was even going to be an issue at all. Even if we weren't, we were only asking for 18 inches into the side yard setback. In some cases, in the past, we've actually been fully in the side yard setback. So it was kind of a surprise for us that it was a problem, and if we had known, we would have designed it completely different. We just didn't, so we ended up in this situation, unfortunately.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, Councillor Murdoch?
Or do I I don't know if staff can or cannot, but can we just get a verification of that sort of chain of events, that there was a sort of a permit sort of process and then after the fact? I just want to get a sense of where this is falling on.
I think that normally, under normal circumstances, what happens is that there's a general conversation with the builders, but there's no commitments on anything. Like I would believe that staff would not say, yes, that those stairs can be put there until you actually see the actual plans. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
So is that your recollection of events? So basically what we're saying is that if you would have had a general conversation with staff in regards to whether stairs would be allowed there or not, staff would not commit until they actually saw the actual plans. They wouldn't say that those stairs were allowed or not allowed until they actually saw the actual plans.
No, I disagree. I had this conversation quite specifically about this property, and I have people in my office that remember exactly the day I came in. They have, I had a piece of paper that I used when we discussed it, and somebody waiting to make changes to plans to make sure that what we proposed was going to work. And that's why we did exactly what we did. We wouldn't have submitted it for a permit if we had been told anything different.
Thank you. Mayor Jensen.
Question for Ms. Jensen, and that has to do with you're recommending approval on this, which in the face of the APC suggesting it not be approved. So could we have your kind of understanding? It's just not the, did I read it? Yes, I think that's right. Can we just get your thinking on this? What is it that is positive about this? And obviously for you, the positives outweigh the negatives. And could you just kind of walk us through that from through a planner's lens, which you've obviously applied to it? Please.
Certainly, through you, Chair. So essentially, when we are looking at a development variance application, which any property owner is entitled to do, there's legislation in the Local Government Act that says if somebody is looking to amend a zoning bylaw in some way, shape, or form, that they can go through a development variance permit process. So in this particular instance, the applicant is looking to vary the entire the interior side lot line and the total side lot lines as a result of the requirements that are set out in our zoning bylaw. So we would look at each case of a DVP application on a site-by-site basis. What are the characteristics of the site? In this particular instance, it's a relatively flat site. We recognize that there's already the mature vegetation, i.e. the boulevard tree that's sitting out in the front. So how do we work around that boulevard tree? They are entitled to have a paved surface within the outside of the front yard setback, which is what they've proposed to do. They can put that in place already. They are essentially proposing to then reorient the driveway around so that they can access that parking pad, but it is increasing their setback area. So in this case, we're protecting a tree, giving them additional paved surface. With respect to the side yard setback, if we go back to the recommendations that were set out by the Floor Area Review Committee, the concerns that were addressed there, the retaining wall that will be required in order to establish that stairwell will have to meet building code requirements, so there's no concern about the stability of the side yard and affecting the adjacent property owner. As far as the access is concerned, there is opportunity for front to rear access a lot between the front and the rear yards, so that condition is essentially met. So ultimately, we look at things like privacy to adjacent property owners, we look at the impacts to the site, and is it really going to impact the streetscape of the neighborhood? And in our opinion, it was satisfying all of those.
Thank you.
I actually have a question in regards to the driveway, because I look at that and I wonder how curving around the tree adds to the coverage. Because to me, if you were going where the tree was or is, and you went straight, that would be the same amount of driveway. So my question would be, why do you need to actually go around the side of the house? Why not cut the driveway off just going into the garage?
It's because when we proposed our original driveway, which also included a side parking stall beside the house to the left, we put grass strips up the middle of the driveway, the main straight one in, and also the one curving. Now that we're curving as much as we are, trying to do grass strips is just we're gonna be driving over the grass to get up into those driveways, so that's why it's increased the paving. We've eliminated the grass strips completely.
Okay.
So
I actually, on that street, I don't believe that. I mean, that would be the first driveway like that on that street. The other driveways on that street are just basically straight into the garage. So I'm wondering why the extra area needs to be done on the side to begin with. I mean, to me, if it's a choice between not having as much paved coverage on a front lawn, or taking away that piece of driveway, I would take away that piece of driveway. Personally.
But we felt that because we could meet the 25% with a straight-on driveway, it's unfortunate that the tree would have to go, but we could do it. We felt it was a reasonable trade-off to ask for a bit more paving in order to curve around the tree and save it. It's not the most convenient driveway either to have to curve around a tree to get in. I mean, it'd be much easier to drive straight in and back straight out. So for what like our clients are willing to do this because they were asked to, I think that's it's a minor trade-off to give them a bit more paved surface.
Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. One is, these are permeable pavers, so they'll be able to perm through the surface, so you're not taking away the surface water will be able to go through.
Yeah.
And you're doing this to protect the tree and preserve the tree. And the second thing is, it looks as though that the property to the south of you is actually a 10-foot setback. It's not the 5-foot setback side. Is that correct?
I think so.
You don't have it on your thing here, but it certainly looks like it's pretty well.
It looks at least 10 feet.
At least 10 feet or more. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions from committee? If not, I'm going to go to the public to see if the public would like to come forward and speak. So I see someone wanting to come forward. Please state your name and the area in which you live.
Do I need the microphone? Or
You do need the microphone, yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Excuse me.
That's okay.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Peter Marshall Glue. That's Marshall with a double L hyphen G-L-E-W if you're writing it down. I live immediately adjacent to the property in question on the north side. I take no issue with the south side variance. It's of no concern to me at this point in time, certainly. The problem I have is with the variance and the parking pad that's become such a point at this stage. The parking pad, if you look at the plan, is to sit immediately adjacent to the garage on the north side and immediately adjacent to the fence that currently divides the property. My concern arises from the review of that plan provided and the fact that the space dividing the property fence and the house under construction is currently 9 feet wide. I don't know quite how you're going to get a vehicle into a 9-foot wide space. The current width of vans, for example, is approximately 7.5 feet. Most sedan cars these days are about 6.5 to 7 with the mirrors. There is going to be, I hope, although it's not on the plan, some kind of retaining wall on the north side, because the parking pad in question is about 2 feet below the line at my property level. Parts of it are excavated currently below the concrete footings for the fence posts. If one puts a retaining wall on that north side, I don't see personally, and it's just a matter of practice, how you're going to get on that curved drive a vehicle round the corner of the tree and into a parking space that gives you less than a foot on each side. And the foot I'm talking about, there's going to be a garage wall which is 23 feet high on this side and which goes straight up as you come into that. And on the other side there'll be a retaining wall which currently has a 6-foot fence on it. So you've got a 9-foot wall on one side and a 23-foot wall on the other. From a practical point of view, and I measured it just before I came to this meeting, I can add, and I can do that without stepping onto the property. I just pushed the tape measure through, so there was no trespass involved. The issue from my point of view is that it's an impractical parking place, and as such, it seems to me that the application to have more concrete in order to get to it is somewhat redundant. I can say that on the back lane of Lincoln, there are only 2 houses that don't have their parking pads, their additional spacing off the back lane. My suggestion is that it's not feasible to have a parking pad there, and it's not wide enough, and I cannot see how it's going to be accessible or it's going to be usable when it's done, unless there's something that Mr. Collins can perhaps speak to me about. And that's my question to Mr. Collins is, how's it going to get there? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. So, Mr. Collins, if you would like to reply to that.
Well, according to the survey and how we place this house, there's a 3.05 meter setback on that side of the property, which is a 10-foot setback, not 9 feet to the property line, which is more than adequate to park a car on. We've done garages that are 10 feet wide inside that have walls on both sides that actually function. So,
okay. Yep, go ahead.
Through the chair.
If you just want to state your name.
My name's Erica Lang. I'm the property owner. I'm a resident of Oak Bay currently as well. I just wanted to add that the parking pad in question is currently not part of this variance. The parking pad is already approved on the current building permit. The variance is about the driveway approaching both the garage and the parking pad to curve around the tree. We're currently building to that permit that already has a parking pad. And our intention there was to allow access both to myself and my husband to get into the house without having to park one car behind the other, you know, for groceries and getting the kids out of the house and everything. So that's why we designed it that way. And this is just to try and save the tree before the 25-foot line.
Good, thank you. Yes, Mr. Marshall Glue, I'll allow you to come back one more time.
Sorry.
You must use the microphone.
Well, the concern level's just gone up a little because the fence currently sits at, as I say, about 9 feet, on the other side of which is my house, including a patio that we use and a row of probably 12 trees that are in there. Do I take it from Mr. Collins here that all those are going to be taken out in order to put that parking pad in? Because if they are, that's the first time I've heard about it. I know the surveyor has been in and he didn't speak to me. Mr. Collins has certainly not called me and told me that it's their intention to take out the fence and excavate onto my property. The surveyor who did the job of surveying certainly didn't tell me anything about that. And I don't know the builder's name. His name is Ron of Rob Ron Construction. I believe he's the owner. I spoke to him on a number of occasions, predominantly about front and landscaping and the tree issue. And when I did talk to him latterly, I was informed very firmly and with one hand up that he had nothing to talk to me about. And he told me that on a number of occasions when I said I did have things to talk about because I was the neighbor of the property that was being built. I've had a number of conversations over the last few months with the new owners when I look forward to being their neighbors, but at no time have they said, oh, and by the way, you're going to lose the line of trees between your house because we are widening that from its present position. So if it's the case that I now understand that we are going to be facing some kind of excavation onto our property, the removal of the fence and shrubbery and bushes that we've planted, I'm going to ask for an adjournment of this particular decision, if I may, so that I can get a surveyor and find out whether or not this survey is correct, because there are problems with the surveys on Lincoln Road, as I understand it. I feel somewhat affronted by the fact that I'm now being told that, well, the way we can get the drive in is you're going to lose a foot. But I'll leave it at that, and I'll leave it to council in that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there's a couple of things in there. So can we address, and perhaps through staff, if we know anything about the, I believe I have also heard that there's an error in the surveying across down Lincoln Road. Have you heard anything about that, Ms. Jensen, or are you aware of anything?
No, I'm not aware of anything. We would have to check our records.
Okay, and can you address the concerns that have come up there, Mr. Collins?
So through the chair, the property pins that were put in for the survey that we had done do show that the fence encroaches a bit on the property and on our other side as well. And we did speak about that, Peter and myself, and we haven't done any string analysis to see where that goes or how far. But we did have a conversation and talk about that survey that was conducted. And I think, they built recently, and I think whatever the distance is from the edge line, we will abide by the accurate survey.
I think that's what's in question, though. Then what is the accurate survey?
Right, yeah, so it was redone, and I don't think it had been done previously. But certainly if another survey, if you'd like to do another survey.
Okay, so interesting, because I'm looking at a picture right now, and I can see what you're talking about, which is the fence. What I'm looking at is the fence, and then there's a whole line of trees on your side of the property, Mr. Marshall Glue, and that's what you're talking about, that you're saying that fence is actually your property and that you're going to take that fence out and remove those trees?
I don't know how far, or I don't think the trees would be in question, but I mean, we haven't done any measurements or anything.
I don't think the surveyor provided that information, because I haven't seen on our surveys anything showing the fence or trees or anything like that. That's why if you look at our proposal, we're not showing it, with a fence line over the property line, because I didn't even know that was, in fact, I just knew that when you told me a couple days ago that was the situation.
Okay, any suggestions from committee on how you want to proceed with this? Because now it's a little bit murky, I think. Councillor Murdoch.
Well, I would just think that if we're here to consider the variances on the application and not the other aspects of it. I think the accuracy of the survey could be dealt with. This committee will only recommend to council on the variances. It certainly wouldn't preclude the process from going forward of in parallel, having the applicant and the neighbor can do surveys and have a look at the implications of that. I don't know. I think that's an important question for them, but for this body tonight, unfortunately, I think we're really primarily dealing with the variances in front of us, which are not related to the surveying accuracy.
Okay, I'm just not sure how comfortable I feel moving forward with it without having that correct survey information, but
I will move the staff recommendation.
Okay. Seconded, so discussion. Councillor Murdoch? I'll let Councillor Croft go first.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Councillor Murdoch has captured this quite accurately, that we have what we have in front of us. We have a staff recommendation, and I think that with that large setback on the south side to the neighbor, obviously some issues that they have to sort out with their neighbor to the north, but I don't think that should affect our decision.
Thank you, Councillor Murdoch.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't have an issue with the variances on the driveway. I think the reasons for doing that are reasonable. I do have issues with the stairs. I do think that new builds need to comply with their bylaws. I don't see a reason not to. I am a little bit, well, they don't absolutely have to, but I think the intent of the floor area review was not just to allow egress. It was to create a buffer between all building on the side yard setbacks, including deep underground. And shallow ones do not affect this, but the deep ones do. So I do have some concerns with that setback. I'm considering supporting this motion, just given the background of this particular application, but have a very difficult time with the new builds coming forward on this one. I think and in fairness, I think I'm giving Mr. Collins some respect here. He does a lot of work in the community and has earned some trust on this one. But I do think that, going forward, I really have a very hard time approving these things. I think the intent there was more than just allowing egress. It was to actually provide a buffer of all building from both side yard setbacks. And it's not that difficult to incorporate that design into builds. You can have a slight narrowing and widening and have stairs go down to a door. It's 2 feet. It's not a big deal, but so that's where I'm sitting at with this one. No problem with the driveway, but a slight problem with the stairs as they stand. So thank you.
I do believe that the member of the public would like to say one more thing, in which I checked with staff, and we can allow that to happen if you'd like to come forward.
Hi, Trudy Mole. I also live in Lincoln. It was just a matter of clarification that the north and south, a few of you have mixed up. So the apparent but debatable 10-foot is on the north, and the 5-foot is on the south. Okay, as long as we've all got that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, there's a lane at the back.
Okay, any further comments? Mayor Jansen.
Obviously, the driveway issue is one that was kind of suggested by our staff, and I think there's good reason, and I don't disagree with Councillor Murdoch for supporting that. I think it protects another value, and it's really it doesn't amount to more than 8%. I think is the increase. On the issue of the stairs, I listened carefully to what Ms. Jensen said in terms of the criteria as to why you have these from a planning point of view. And it strikes me that she ticked off all the boxes as to why this is appropriate. And I don't think she took it lightly in the face of a recommendation by the APC to deny it. And certainly that kind of catalog of criteria and how they're on the positive side, I think merits that are such that we support this. So and I think so I'm going to support it. I think the issue on with the surveying, I think it is a separate issue. It shouldn't affect us on this one here.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. On this issue, I was sorry for the expression, but a bit sitting on the fence. I don't really have an issue with the paved surface, but I do have an issue with the increase or the decrease in the side lot line. I'm afraid I won't be supporting this motion because of the variance on the side lot line. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll make a comment as well. I can live with the driveway. I am concerned about the survey, but I think that needs to be taken care of. But the stairs on the side, I also have a bit of an issue when you're working with a bare lot. I can't see having to give a variance for something like that. What I would say is that it's a wonderful road to live on. I live on Lincoln, so I know this, but more than 100 meters away from this house. And so it's good. I'm glad to see that you are still able to have a good conversation with Peter, your next door neighbor, in regards to this, because it's important to keep up those neighborly relationships. So sadly, I'm going to vote against, and that's on my principle of not of not agreeing with having variances on a bare lot land, but I would be okay with the driveway part of it, so that's not what I'm voting against. I'm voting against the stairs on the side. So without further ado, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Zelka and Braithwaite opposed. Thank you very much. It's moving forward. Okay, our next item is a development variance permit application for 2042 Carnarvon Street. And we have, again, Ms. Jensen to give us an overview from the Planning Department.
This application is actually very similar to the previous one. It's for a below-grade stairwell along the east side of the house. We'll go east-west instead of north-south. Again, the home meets all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw, but variances are required to the total side lot lines. So in essence, the proposed development would meet the interior side lot line setbacks, but they need the variance for the total side lot lines. This was also reviewed by the Advisory Planning Commission at their October 3rd meeting, who supported the requested variance, noting that the individual side lot line setbacks had been met. Staff have also reviewed the application and note the proposed layout would allow for safe access from the front to the rear yard, and that there is little impact to the adjacent neighbor. That neighbor has actually indicated no concern with respect to the proposal, and staff are requesting council direction.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, is the applicant here? Yep. If you want to come forward, is there any questions of the applicant? Seeing none, is there any questions from the public? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further questions? All in, or Councillor Murdoch?
Just a comment. I think this has similar concerns to the first one. I think the difference is really that setback is being met on the piece of things, but I think it's important to note that we still dramatically prefer to see these things all fully compliant, and it is possible to do with design, so we'd like to, in future, if applicants are coming forward, I mean, I know it saves time and money as well, not going through a variance process, but it's also, I think, in best practices to try and stay within them. But I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you very much. Next is item number 8, which is a development variance permit for 1743 Armstrong Avenue. Ms. Jensen, if you'd like to give us an overview from the Planning Department.
Thank you, Chair. This development variance permit is to vary sections of the parking bylaw rather than the zoning bylaw in order to reduce the required on-site parking. So this is an older home that the owners would like to utilize the existing attached garage, which is located on the lower level of the home, for additional living space. So that would result in 2 variances to the parking bylaw, one to remove the requirement for covered parking and one to allow for 1 on-site parking space instead of the required 2. The Advisory Planning Commission reviewed this application at their October 3rd meeting and indicated the requested variances were supportable as it makes use of the existing housing stock. Staff have worked with the applicant to determine if other siting options were available for additional parking on site, but there really don't appear to be any other feasible alternatives due to slopes, retaining walls, and landscaping. Staff are requesting council direction.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Jensen? Seeing none, is the applicant here? Yep. If you want to come forward, is there any questions of the applicant? Seeing none, anybody from the public want to?
Recommendation to council to
Oh,
approve?
hang on, Mayor Jensen.
I'm quite familiar with Armstrong. I've had friends who lived there over the years. And parking is tight there on a very small street. Although I understand that just given the depth of your driveway, that you actually could fit almost 2 cars there, because there's no sidewalk on your side, right? Which means that technically, you being in your driveway, you're on the boulevard, but it doesn't impede anyone walking on the street. So how long is that, and can you fit 2 modest cars on there? And do you own modest cars? You'll have to turn on the microphone.
I'm Travis Dirksen, the owner of said property, and yes, we can.
You're gonna have to.
We can fit two vehicles, 2 larger vehicles on that property with no problem.
Okay, that's. I mean, again, as I said, I know it, and I kind of eyeballed it, and it seemed that way, and I talked to staff about it today, so you really are able to get 2 cars off the road, because I think that's what the neighbors would like, so that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby?
I just wanted to mention that I noticed in a letter of the correspondence that is attached that one of the neighbors mentions that the garage space was too small to fit a vehicle anyway. So, I mean, honestly, we're asking a lot to expect somebody to fit a car in a space that can't fit a car. So I think we all appreciate that these houses are built.
Unless it's my smart car.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mayor Johnson?
Well, what I was going to say was I think a lot of the houses along that street have exactly that problem, and a lot of houses in South Oak Bay have that problem. They were built for, I think, Morris miners in the 40s or 50s, and really they're not realistically able to accept a modern car. So
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Actually, I'd like to hear from the public first. Seeing nothing, now I'll accept a motion.
Oh, move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Any further questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Oh, any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and now we come to the last item on our agenda, which is development variant permit application for 1984 Crescent Road. Ms. Jensen, if you'd like to give an overview of this one, please.
As council may recall, a development variance permit application came in front of them in February of this year, a variance for the same property, and that was to add an attached garage and undertake some other renovations to the existing home. Council approved that at the time. So the existing home, through those approvals, the home has been removed without a demolition permit, and the applicant has indicated that that was due to some structural issues to the home. With the removal of the home, however, any legal nonconformities for its siting were lost, and new construction would have to comply to the zoning bylaw. So the application in front of council tonight proposes to construct a new home in essentially the same location and design as the original home. To do so requires variances similar to the last approved permit, as well as a few additional variances because of that new construction. A chart was laid out in the staff report to help indicate the differences between the two. The Advisory Planning Commission also reviewed the application at their last meeting and indicated that as a new build, there was an opportunity to either meet the zoning bylaw requirements or reduce the number of variances. Their recommendation was to deny the application. So from a staff review, it would be difficult to site anything on the land without some variances due to the steepness of the grade. It would also mean additional impact to the site through excavation and construction activity. So there may be an opportunity to reduce variances because of the aspects of the site, but it wouldn't necessarily be in the best interest of the site. The applicant has also indicated, and we do have attached to the agenda, some neighbors who provided correspondence indicating support.
Thank you so much. Any questions of Ms. Jensen, Mayor Jensen?
And we're no relation, the two of us, Ms. Jensen. Yeah, just so others people here might not know that. Very similar to the question I asked you on the other application. APC denied it, but could you walk us through the kind of design lens that you used before to tell us why you've come to a different conclusion? I think you touched on it in your presentation, but I wonder if you could highlight it and go through it kind of by categories, if that's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you refer back to the report, I mean, there definitely are quite a few variances attached to this to be able to construct the building as it originally was. Essentially, there are a number of components attached to this. The site itself is already disturbed. So the applicants had actually started undertaking works to construct the development as was approved by council in February. So road works have already been done to push the driveway in, to construct the new garage. It was really an incident where removal happened without having the appropriate permits in place. So you already have a disturbed area at the top of the site that allows for construction of the building. There was one tree on the site that had already been removed for construction of the garage, so that has not changed. There's no other impact to the site as a result of that. The trees to the rear of the site are not changing. And we do have neighbor support. They are used to the building where it was. They didn't want any further siting to impede upon the views that they already had or impacting their privacy.
And if I may continue through you, Chair, in other words, had the original building been built, I take it the report, because I haven't kind of put them side by side and gone through each one. Had the original building been built as we approved it, it really would be significantly the same as the one that's being requested now, or is it completely the same?
It is significantly the same. There are some minor modifications to the design of the building itself, utilizing French doors instead of the windows that were originally proposed, but essentially the building is exactly the same.
So in terms of the form of the building as opposed to the architectural nuances such as windows and French doors, I take it it's the same, if I can call it the same box, they're building in the same box, just maybe slightly different facade?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions from committee members? Councillor Murdoch.
Just so I'm clear, when calculating the floor area, obviously the exemptions for basements changes with the age of the building. Does that have any impact on the fact that this was calculated originally as an old building and is now being recalculated as a new building?
Through you, Chair, no, they're essentially at the same floor area as what was originally proposed. There is a clause in the zoning bylaw that if you have a home that was built prior to 1986, we look at the exemptions based on where the lower floor is from the average natural grade. For pre-1986, that would be 2.22 meters above grade. For a home that's constructed after 1985, so in essence what they're proposing to do now, that would be 1.52 meters above grade, and they're sitting at 0.8. So they're essentially at the same floor area.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a couple of questions if other people don't. So the question that I would like to ask staff is what kind of sanctions are put against someone who demolishes a house without a permit?
There are clauses in the building bylaw that would essentially mean that they pay double fees for the demolition permit.
And how much is a demolition permit?
I believe it's $400.
So they're paying $800 for basically demolishing a house without permission.
I believe that is the amount. We would have to double check.
Okay, and then my next question would be, how is it possible that a person can be contracted to demolish a house without physically seeing a demolition permit? Is that normal that somebody would come in and demolish a house without seeing a permit, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, it would not be normal, no.
Okay, and do we know who demolished the house?
No, I do not.
Because to me, my opinion would be that if a business comes in and demolishes a house without seeing a permit, why are we allowing that business to do business in Oak Bay? Number one, I would say, because that to me is slapping us in the face for our bylaws for not following what we would consider needed to do demolition. So that's just a point that I want to make. So let's call the applicants forward. I know the applicant has requested to make a presentation, so I know you're going to keep your remarks very, very brief, and then we'll entertain some questions.
Thank you. My name is Bill Yearwood. My wife and I own this property, and our intentions, as being said, was to remodel the existing house. I presently live in Vancouver, and our contractor had control of the site, And this small presentation shows you a little bit about how we got to where we are here, and I think unfortunate and have suffered a lot from this in both financial and time and stress. As we discussed, this is the building plan as approved, and I'm using the word demolition now because that's what I thought it was in gutting the house to meet those plans. I visited the site about once a week. I came over here on my bicycle, and this was what I was seeing and expecting. Later on, it was pointed out to me that this foundation would not meet engineering requirements, and the building contractor suggested that they would have to take down that whole front wall, and given the site slope, etc., there wouldn't be anything to support the house. So they had they would have to remove most of the house, and that would not be well. The way he put it, and I think I explain it here, is that that he said, well, it'd be better to build a new house, and the building permit would be changed once the engineering report was received. Not being in this business or knowing what the implications were, I agreed. I said, well, if that's the that's what we have to do. I can't see any way around it. And the contractor proceeded to demolish the remaining structure. It was then that I learned that was not so easy and was not the appropriate thing to do, and what it triggered. And these questions came about, but there was never any intention to demolish the house from our perspective as the property owners. We were following what the builder suggested was the engineering's requirements. We went ahead and submitted new plans. These plans, however, were already in place because the cost of the structure required to put in that balcony. We had removed the balcony in newer plans and changed the windows and put in French doors to allow some open access in place of removing the balcony. The other pieces of the changes are cosmetic in window design and some face. During this process, we talked to the neighbors, and again, we're flabbergasted ourselves and stressed over what had happened, and they have supported us throughout this as to what we're going through, and have made several communications to us, and I believe to council and the planning, that they would prefer the house to be constructed as they had initially approved the variances. Lastly, I'd like to add that we've to build the house as planned, to modify the house as planned, and we sunk about $120,000 into that, which is still there. The excavation and to make an elevator to fit into the old house design is all part of that, and we certainly didn't intend to find ourselves in this position. When you ask who approved it, I guess ultimately you can say that I did in the end, but without any knowledge. It was an error that was unintentional based on lack of knowledge and no advice from the building contractor. To the contrary.
Okay, questions from committee, please. No one? Okay. I'll ask him some questions. Actually, I'm going to ask for comments from the public first, I think. So, comments from the public? Any? No? Okay. So, nothing from committee? Okay, then I'll go. Okay, Councillor Kirby.
I was just going to make a motion to approve.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Comments on the motion? Yeah, Councillor Zalka.
Thank you. With respect to the removal of the balcony, I was wondering if staff could comment on the impact on the new design and floor area ratio, those sort of things, with respect to the removal of the balcony on the front facade. I see that that's been enclosed essentially.
Because the garage is attached to the home, it makes no difference with respect to the setbacks, and essentially it is still meeting floor area ratio.
Any other comments? Councillor Murdoch.
I think this is one of those rare ones that looks completely egregious on the face of it. But, you know, I think recognizing the fact that this is a, you know, the best location for the house is where it always was, because it causes the least amount of disturbance. The house is, I actually really love this house. I'm sorry to see it come down and go back up again, but you know, it's fairly iconic in placement, and although it seems out of sorts with the other buildings, does line up with it. And I think it in this situation, we're better off putting it back where it was. And since we've approved it in the past, I don't really have a big issue with just moving it back to where it was. It really does seem on the face of it, like giving all the variances, that it looks monstrous. But as staff has pointed out, some of them, like the heights and so forth, just by the nature of the slope, are just going to be there no matter what. And to get anywhere close to the square footage allowed for the building without kind of doing some weird step up the side of the hill thing. So I'll support the motion on this one. I always prefer on a new build to again, like I said before, to stay within the boundaries. But I think this is a recognition that this is a sort of a funny new build. So I think that's all I have to say.
Councillor Croft.
I kind of share Councillor Murdoch's view too, that first look at this, I thought that we were looking at a very different conclusion than what I think we're going to end up with, and that out of the 11 variances that we approved back in February, we've actually reduced them by 3 down to 8 variances, which is a nice thing. This is a very challenging lot, and it's nice to see that you're going to put a nice new home up there, which is, of course, going to cost you a lot more than what you anticipated, but we hope you enjoy it and hope you enjoy the community when you move here.
Okay, so I guess I'll go next. So I understand exactly where my fellow councillors are coming from. However, I'm going to take a little bit of a different stab at this because I am a true believer in that you have to follow the rules. And in this case, perhaps you didn't know what the rules were, but I think that you should have, as a home builder, you should have probably known what the rules were. And you should have had help from a contractor. You should have had a good contractor who could have told you that you should have had a demolition permit. I'm assuming that it's not you, Mr. Collins, because you would have known that that something like that was needed. So here's where I'm coming from. I totally feel for what you're going through. I understand that this is going to be the best house to be built here. However, I have to vote against this only because I have to look at it from a point of view of another citizen. So if it was me living next to you and you had been able to go ahead and do whatever you wanted on your property, which is basically what you've done, and I've lived next door and I've had to follow all of the rules when I built my house, then basically you're making a scofflaw of all the bylaws that are put before us in our community. And so I feel that someone has to stand up for the rest of the people within Oak Bay. And granted, this could have been a a sad error that came to you that you didn't mean to do, and I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I know you're going to end up with a lovely house in Oak Bay, but on principle alone, I have to vote against this because I don't believe that it sends a good message to others, that others can't just come along and say, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want, and basically I'm going to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. So that's where I'm coming from. I have this feeling around the table that you're going to be able to move this forward anyhow, so but I am going to definitely vote against it for those reasons, and that's all I'm going to say. Councillor Kirby.
I'm just going to say that mistakes happen, and I think this was obviously an error, and the end result is that you're going to end up with a house that's very similar to the initial plan, and that the neighbors are happy, and you know, it's you that's paid the price but through this error, right? I don't think it's fair to penalize you for that, and so yeah, I definitely would support the application as is, because either way they're going to end up with the same result, a house in the same spot, and that the neighbors are happy with the siting and the design.
And I think that's what I was saying, is that had they come forward and got their demolition permit, as they should have, then this house would have been approved. However, they didn't, so someone has to protect the rest of the residents. Councillor Zalka.
Thank you, Chair. There's a reference to an engineering report in the presentation that may or may not support the determination of the soundness of the foundation. I'd be curious to know, did staff receive this engineering report, and did it indicate that the foundations were not suitable or needed to be replaced or something like that? Please. I couldn't find the engineering report amongst the documents provided us.
I can't confirm that. I believe it was submitted to our planning technician.
Do you know if there was an engineering stamp on this engineering report? Or we don't know anything about this?
I can't confirm that. Perhaps Mr. Collins could answer
recall
that.
there being a stamp, but it was provided by an engineer who's a structural engineer on engineering letterhead, like their letterhead. And yeah, we were asked for it, and we delivered it up to Oak Bay.
So then, Oak Bay was asked for this engineering report. Can I ask the procedures in general around the request for an engineering report and what this report was asked for? What was the intent of Oak Bay's asking for this report, please? And was that purpose achieved?
The engineering report was requested just to confirm the background, so we had all of the history behind what happened on the site and bringing this application forward. In terms of attaching it to the agenda, we wouldn't necessarily have done that because it was respect to the previous home. This application is for the variance, is for a new build.
Thank you. Mayor Jensen.
Thank you. I thought I heard you, Chair, kind of characterize or give an example of if someone just saying, I don't care about the rules, I'm going to just do what I do, what I want to do. I wouldn't characterize these facts in that way, because I would agree with you if there was, and we've had these situations in this chambers before where people have actually had that attitude, and I think those attitudes would be concerning. I don't see that in these facts. I see that as a genuine error and mistake. I mean, there is some irony. I hope Mr. Yearwood may not see the irony, but that his first contact here would be an accident. And we're kind of almost forensically looking at what caused that accident. But I take him at his word. And these things do happen. They're very unfortunate. And there is a price to be paid by Mr. Yearwood just in having to start fresh, I think somebody pointed out. So we should be listening, in this case here, to the immediate neighbors, and that they really wanted what was going to be built, and that's what they're going to get.
And I think that at the end of the day, I think that's a benefit to the immediate neighbors, and I think to our community. We had approved something that essentially is going to be built, and just be built with new materials. And obviously better materials is going to be, I suspect, more environmentally resilient. It's going to be more energy efficient, I suspect, and all of those things. So I don't have any hesitation in supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zelka, and then I'm going to be calling the question.
Thanks very much. With respect to the BC Building Code, is this, and a question for staff, is this being referred to as an owner-builder type building? I know there's a whole concept about the owner-builder being able to build their own home within the BC Building Code, where you don't need an engineer, you don't need an architect. Basically, you're houses of a certain size, you're allowed to sort of essentially build on your own, as long as you, of course, meet the building code and you follow the various regulations. Is that the arrangements being made for this particular property? I just wanted to ask in terms of I know we have errors, I know we have unintentional mistakes and those sort of things, but I'm curious as to understand the context of this situation. Thank you.
I can't speak to those at this moment because this is a development variance permit application. We actually have no new building permit application in yet for this site.
If I may ask the question then of the applicant. Is there an architect or an engineer designated for this property, or is it being built by an owner builder?
That's us.
Yes.
And there was a registered builder hired to build and construct the renovation, and there will be a registered builder who carries on with the construction. So it's not a builder building, or sorry, an owner building his own house. It never was.
But a different contractor, right?
That's yet to be determined.
I just want to make one point that I noticed that in the Arborist report that they were pointing out that you should really protect the remaining trees in the back of the house, so I would hope that you would be able to do that. Again, I apologize for having to vote against this, but for the reasons that I stated, I will be. So I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. Thank you very much. Good luck with your house. And I'll move adjournment. Oh,
Second.
thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much, everyone.